The Peekskill NAACP, Visible, Valuable, Viable, presents the Civic Engagement Committee's Meet the Candidates 2021.
Agavino from Peekskill, who was arrested in, I believe it was January 2020, January, February. He's still actually being paid by the Peekskill Police Department after being arrested for burglary, alleged burglary, sexual abuse, and stalking. What would you do to make sure this case is being taken care of in a timely fashion once you become mayor?
I can't really talk a lot about this case and about the personnel around it, but what I can say to you is that COVID has played a big part in this. However, we're kind of stuck between the wall and a hard place. If the city took disciplinary actions before this case was tried in court and it came back and there wasn't enough evidence and it was dismissed, then we would have an issue with the criminal case. So we need to wait, unfortunately, until the criminal case is done, and then we can handle the disciplinary action afterwards. The last thing that we want is to have this police officer still employed with us. And if we did the disciplinary first, so say perhaps the witness was not prepared or couldn't show up or what have you, we would have a problem. So that's why he's still employed. This would have been done already had COVID not backed up the courts. Should I become mayor, and I would hope that this would be done prior to the election and prior to the end of the year, because the courts are beginning to open up again. And we are asking on a weekly basis where this case is within the court system. So it's not something that's lying dead. It's something that is moving, but the bureaucratic wheels are slow, but I would push that this be taken care of as quickly as possible. But again, we do not want to be kind of stuck with an officer of this, character.
Yeah, well, that's a tough situation and a tough question. I heard Chief Halmy the other day, I think in response to Chair Wright, or I forget who brought it up, but he says he's frustrated, the courts are backed up. I think it raises a larger question, which is, even in a police department like the Peekskill Police Department that is held in high regard for the most part, and not looked upon as a troubled department, there are still issues. We paid out as taxpayers over $100,000 settlement recently for a police brutality incident on Central Avenue. There was, of course, a few years prior, another incident over by Walgreens. So these things do happen. No department is perfect. I think we need to sort of keep that in mind and make sure that we are holding our department to the absolute highest standards, and not just say, well, this just happened, or we need to look at these incidents and see what did happen, what could be changed, what could be implemented. My impression was that Chief Halmy's, who I worked with a lot and respect, but his response to the Central Avenue incident was, well, we paid that settlement, but my officers didn't necessarily do anything wrong. And that didn't necessarily strike me as the right answer. So now we have Officer Agavino charged with some horrific things. And I think we need to ask questions like, how did no other officers in that department have any idea that something like this was going on? How can we hold this officer accountable through the courts, which unfortunately we have to be patient, but we need to also look and say, how are we not going to just say this was a one-off? And how are we going to take real steps to address this in the department? It seems like there needs to be some type of additional oversight, so that what's alleged shouldn't have happened, of course. So I remain concerned, frustrated. Unfortunately, there isn't a whole lot that the mayor and council can do to necessarily push the courts forward. I think it is important to look and make sure that it's not being held back through any kind of pressure or anything, and I don't believe that it is. But I think we need to watch this carefully, make sure the officer is held accountable, and ask of the Peekskill Police Department and the mayor and council who oversee the police department, how do we make sure that this does not happen again?
So I believe that officer needs to be terminated, period. He needs to go. He needs to be held accountable for what he's done. And I do hope that the justice system will truly hold him accountable, because we also see that being an issue with our justice system. Truly, it holds certain people accountable, but other people who are not people of color, people who are not of lower income, police officers, people who have certain power dynamics, tend to be able to escape justice. And I hope that that's not the occasion, or that's not the situation in this specific occasion. It's truly unfortunate that we have had to pay him while he is right now not serving as an officer within our department. He is right now has taken a leave, but we are currently paying him. And I believe that moving forward, police officers should be held liable for this misuse of power and this abuse of power. The city should not be held liable for that. They themselves should carry their own liability. I know that a lot needs to change on the state level in order to allow for municipalities to be able to enable those types of protections. But I do believe that that's the type of advocacy that needs to be done in order to be able to move these policies forward. And I'm prepared to do that, and I believe that my slate is also prepared to do that as well.
I haven't heard of this case specifically, so I don't want to speak on specifics about the case, because I don't know enough at the moment. And thank you for bringing it up. I think just more generally, I think we've seen court cases throughout the pandemic have to take a different perspective and really just take a different route on how it's being addressed. I have a few friends who work in the legal field who have said that there's a lot more flexibility in being able to get to these cases quicker, and being able to really be able to go through the trial and make sure that whatever needs to be fulfilled or whatever the case is required to be discussed, they can move forward. So yeah, I don't want to speak on a case that I don't know very much on. So I just wanted to give that transparency as well.
A lot of that goes beyond, it goes into deep waters, and it goes into the power of the police union. And I think the wonderful task force that was put together to take a look at reforming and improving, I guess is a better way to say, our police department, which I regard as a good police department that can always be better. They have tried to get rid of them. It's a system that protects people unjustly, I believe, from being eliminated or taken away from the police department. In some cases, convicted of things that they've done. So it's a work that we all need to undertake seriously. We can't have police officers acting like that and being protected. And the unions, I believe, have to come to the table and recognize that they cannot support some actions by some of their officers the way they have. And then I think the courts can take a smoother action toward dealing with it, or maybe it doesn't even need to go to court because this person should just have been fired.
You're very aware of the recommendations that the Peekskill Police Reform Task Force submitted. out of those recommendations, what do you think is most important? And how will you put them into action if you gain office?
Well, I would say that the mental faculties, really looking at the mindset of the officers, whether that's through the hiring process or just their day-to-day lives. Being a cop is a tough job. You're dealing with a lot of different personalities day in and day out, and it can be a heavy weight on the mind. So I would say making sure that our officers are getting mentally checked up, just to make sure that they're coming out in the community and they just have a strong mind. Also I would say maybe some training, more training on the culture of the city that they're policing. A lot of times you have people coming from different communities, a lot of times not our communities. So yeah, one part of the thing that I liked about it was making sure that we're getting into the minds of the officers, whether that's from the hiring process or just getting checked up. I mean, I don't know, I have law enforcement in my family. I mean, I don't know, you would know better than me, Derek, if there is a type of protocol where you have to go in and just speak to someone just about how you're doing. I mean, I don't know if that's something that already happens, but I would say that's probably the most important thing, And I mean, as far as implementing it, whatever that process is, I mean, I would definitely fight to make sure that, that becomes a part of the policy in the city of Peekskill.
I know that the people like to choose like the most important. Like some people ask to me sometimes, what is your main issue that you're gonna work? That's the most common question they're doing now. But I have to be honest. I mean, I like almost everything that was in discussion. I think the review committee, I think that's one of the big changes that we can have over there. I remember that I did one of the last recommendation, and maybe it was not like right exactly like I thought about, to have a review with the social service. I mean, there was no like they write hiring a social worker, but the idea is working with the state or the county for the health department to have a social worker who can work with the police, with the court, with the city, to review a lot of cases that I don't see that we never do that. I mean, some places they have a different kind of trouble. Thank God here in Peekskill we don't have many of the problems that we have in the national level. We are, I want to say fine, but let's say so. But when you're talking about domestic violence, you have a lot of domestic violence in the minority group. I mean, like you say, brown people, the Latino people. And we should review why we have that case, and maybe Cortland or maybe, I don't know, Croton or Georgetown or Ossini doesn't have the same problem. And how can we work with that to review cases? I mean, that's one of the things that I would like to focus on that. But it was more than 30 recommendation, and everyone has very important in different areas. You know how that was in different work group and everything. So I want to focus on that also. That's too.
I guess I would say that I really would like for the community to continue to be involved to the extent possible. And I feel like one of the ways to get the ball rolling again is to get people talking about it again. And so I think what I would do is I would encourage the public to, attend a series of public conversations and hope to reach members of the community be above and beyond who participated in the original task reform meetings, because I know that attendance was pretty low. And I would also really like to, I know the NAACP has worked on some surveys. I would also like to work on some surveys and get the results of that and kind of see where the community is at in terms of their priorities for, you know, what needs to be addressed and what the issues that are most impactful are. So I would really look to those surveys, I think, as a guiding part. And then there are some recommendations that I feel like we just need more community input on in general to know how to get the ball rolling. I mean, as somebody involved in education, the SRO program comes to mind. I would really like to engage the school community in that conversation. The stakeholders, you know, really need to be at the table, and that is people who work in the school buildings and students who attend school in the buildings and their families. So there are certain recommendations where I really feel like we would need to have a lot of community conversations to get that ball rolling. I hope that answers your question.
How would you change the running of the Common Council meetings to make them more effective?
I think it's more about giving information back. So I think when a person comes to the council and they have a question and it's asked, and if it can't be answered right at that point, I think we kind of lose connection where that's answered. So the city manager may get that information and give it to them in the next day or so, but the public who's watching may never get that answer. So I think it's important that we start to do department reports and manager reports at every meeting, so that we kind of rotate so people get to know what is going on within the city and it's more open and clear. Also, I think that if a person wants to be heard, that they should submit that information prior to the meeting. It seems to be working well now that we are doing Zoom, because you have to put your questions in before 12 o'clock on that day. I think that would streamline that process. And also, I think we have to work harder on limiting how much stuff we put on the agenda. So if we have big topics that are coming up, we need to have just that one big topic, not 2 or 3 presentations in one night. And I think that would pretty much do it.
Absolutely. That's a great question. The meetings need to really be sort of centered more around the community and the fact that residents can't always just show up at a certain time to be heard. So I think really making sure that public comment is at the beginning and at the end. A big reason I'm running is that I feel like our current government is not always as open and as accessible to the residents as it should be. We had a several months period time where public comment for general items was not allowed. And in my view, it was because they did not want to hear our opinions on the Central Avenue public land sale. So that's to say that for me, hearing from the public is very important. I would like to continue live streaming the meetings so that people can watch them from the comfort of and convenience of their home, but also restore them back into person. Make sure people know that their public comments can be submitted in writing or in person with a bigger window when you can put them in until. And then also in terms of meetings, I think we need to hold regular neighborhood-based town hall meetings. I would like to go into different neighborhoods and let people bring their council concerns to me closer to their home at a time that's more convenient than them. The 7:30 public meeting model is broken. It doesn't work. We need to meet people where they're at. I'm a big believer in that.
Okay.
Sure.
What ideas do you have to improve the perception of some that Peekskill schools are not on par with schools in surrounding communities? Why do you think this perception exists? What areas within the Peekskill school system do you feel needs improvement? And how would you go about making these changes or improvements?
So I will say that I believe that our school is in dire need, our school districts are in dire need of investment. I'm so happy that this year we were able to fully fund foundation aid. That's millions of dollars that are going to be coming into the school district that I believe will truly make a difference. That can bring us on par to some of our other surrounding school districts in the area. That is what this money is meant to do. So I do think that the resources itself will make a difference. In terms of perception, I think it's less about the image of Peekskill and really is about like the tangible needs that currently exist in our school district. I come from, I personally did not go to Peekskill Public Schools. I actually went through a Catholic school system, which is funded by the Archdiocese. And here in Peekskill, we had Assumption School until it closed down due to lack of resources. So I understand what it's like being in a school system that is extremely underfunded. And I understand what it's like going to university where people went to schools who had better resources, who had exposure to more curriculums, to different kinds of what are the names of electives. I sometimes actually even looked at the Peekskill school system as being better than what I had at Assumption and at JFK. But I really do think it comes down to investment. And when we start investing in our schools, when we start investing in our youth, we will see the kind of metrics that people are measuring the qualities of our school change. And so I'm hopeful that we will start to see that change coming in the next few years as we put this money to good use. And as a city, we want to work together with the school district to make sure that whatever gaps that exist, for example, the Youth Bureau, making sure that the Youth Bureau and the future Boys and Girls Club are filling those gaps. One of the things that I have heard from knocking on the doors these last couple of months was that we have no programs for kids who have special who are special needs or who have disabilities at the Youth Bureau. And this is true. I mean, we have to make sure that our programs are truly accessible to all kinds of children here in our city. And those are kind of things that I think we maybe have overlooked, perhaps because it hasn't been brought to our attention or because we haven't been reaching out to that population enough. But I think it's something that we really need to start looking at and working through, and having a partnership with the school to be able to have that discussion, that conversation about what programs do exist and what don't exist and what the needs are is going to be critical and key to making sure that we're truly finding solutions to these problems.
So I actually went to the Peekskill City Schools, which I've enjoyed my time in. I think that there was definitely a need for more funding and more resources. And I think that's just something that we've had a struggle with here in Peekskill, at least in the time that I grew up. And I think that it's really improved a lot since I've graduated in 2013. There are a lot more opportunities. They have the STEM program now. And so I think that we've definitely improved a lot in regards to how far we've come. But I think there has always been this stigma with Peekskill that, there's, who wants to come to Peekskill? What's really in Peekskill, right? And when I hear those kind of remarks and those comments, I have to wonder, why do people feel that way, right? Is it the people who live here? Is there another specific reason? We have a large Black and Brown community here in Peekskill, and it's what makes Peekskill so great, our diversity. But I do think that this narrative has been perpetuated because there hasn't been enough funding. But I don't think that that's the city's fault. I think that if we have leadership who is willing to push for the funding that we need, and making sure that we get all the resources we also need for our students, we should hold our leadership accountable to that. That's why we have people in City Hall who really, if they have, I think about my running mate, Amy Perlow, who is a huge, who works in education. And so I think having a slate also that's well-rounded and people who are in City Hall who have different perspectives on different issues in the community, I think that also is a really great thing to have because it provides us more expertise in that area. And so I think that the city could also work with the Youth Bureau to create more programs. Me, as somebody who I like to consider myself still a young individual, But you know, as I was growing up, it would have been great to have resources that helped me with school or finding a job. And I think that there is a need for that, as well as more individuals start finding different career paths. And I think being able to support students in that way is really, really necessary. So if there's a way for the city to work with the Youth Bureau and to really bring the schools in a way that works for everybody, I think that is definitely necessary. And I think that's the way, that's the kind of the direction we're already going in. So I hope to really just improve on that.
The perception exists because of, you know, the past history of the city. You know, I came here in the 90s, and you know, the city is definitely you know, not what it was you know, 2 decades ago. And yeah, you know, sometimes, you know, it's really hard to break a mindset when people have an idea about anything, you know, not just a school district, just people in general. So, you know, I think that we probably just need to do a better job, you know, in marketing, you know, our wins. You know, from what I understand, you know, the high school graduation rate is up, and the principal, from what I hear, is doing a great job. So, you know, I would say, yeah, we probably need to have put some information out there to combat, you know, that old narrative. As far as ideas, I mean, I have you know, a ton of ideas. You know, we'll probably be here all night talking about ideas. But I do know, as a council person, that you know, my reach is limited, because, you know, that is his own entity. So for me, it's just about, you know, forging relationships, and, you know, just trying to work closely with the school district. You know, education, you know, is very important to me. Usually when I go do the lectures, I always have the kids repeat after me: education is the only way out of poverty. But, you know, and I wish I would talk more about that. But again, I know my reach is limited, and, you know, I don't want to, you know, make anyone feel like they're not doing a good job, because everyone works hard in the city. So, you know, I would prefer to just, you know, develop those relationships, and yeah, just work closely on being innovative, and, you know, trying some new things. But yeah, I want to develop those relationships first before we start talking about.
For you is, what ideas do you have that can improve the perception that Peekskill schools are not on par with the surrounding school districts? Why do you think this perception exists? And what areas specifically do you think within the Peekskill school system do you feel needs improvement, and how can you make those improvements?
I had to be honest. I mean, I ran for the school district in 2015, and I did try to, I had to be honest. I was pushing to more people to get involved, but to run people, maybe they don't have it in the Latino community to get involved and to be part of the community, and maybe they don't have the accent that I have. And yeah, that's I had to be honest with that. And then when I run, because the person who was supposed to run 2 days before the petition, she said, no, I don't want to do that. And I took like 1 day to decide, and I did it. I find the in the chats in the church, the signature. So I decided to run, like just like between 1 day, 2 days by myself. No platform, nobody who endorsed me, nobody. I mean, it was something because I was trying to see change. And my conversation that 20 days, it was about that. I think the perception for the school district as like a bad school, it was more bigger than the reality. Because I got my 2 kids, they graduate. I mean, one graduated in the 15 and the other one graduated in 17. So I got the younger now, she's in first grade. And thank God, I think that perception is changing now. I mean, if you see numbers, if you see even like something that I was talking about to improve the facility for the sport. I mean, I was very involved in a sport in a school, and all the kids when they were going to another place and they have that kind of turf field, that kind of beautiful place, they went like down, like like why we don't have it here, why? And every time when we start to talking about that in the community and in some forums, people start to say, "Oh, we don't need that. We don't need that." I mean, I think we are moving in the right direction in the school now, and there are many organizations putting a lot of effort. I mean, PTO is very involved. I know the Education Foundation, Mr. Frega, she's getting involved in that. So that's a lot of people to get involved with. The Black Diamond, I mean, and everybody's trying to get even the right funds from the school. I mean, I think we are, like I say, we are going in the right direction. The school in the city is working very, very close. And that didn't happen before. It was like, oh no, I don't care what happened over there. I don't care. Now everybody's trying to work together as a city, entire city. It doesn't matter if it's two different governments.
All right, thank you, Micah, for your question, and thank you, Councilman Fernandez. Next, we have education. And
well, first of all, I mean, the perception that Peekskill schools are subpar is false. And to answer your question of why I think that perception exists, I think a large part of it is racism. We have a largely Black and brown student body, and I think that the perception of urban Black and brown schools is negative for reasons that have to do with structural racism in our schools. I also think that when you Google Peekskill schools, report cards come up that are very flawed and problematic, that show poor outcomes for students that are, that are not showing the whole truth, that are not showing sort of the student body that we're working with. We have a large population of students who are learning English as a second language, for example, and that skews data a lot. We have a large percentage of students who are economically disadvantaged and a large percentage of students who have disabilities, and it requires more money to support students in those buckets, and that's part of the foundation aid fight, right? Like, we haven't gotten the money that we need to support our student body until we just want a pretty big landmark budget win that is going to change that over the next few years. But if you look at the data, I mean, our high school graduation rate has climbed very steeply in the past few years. The school is working on building new STEAM, science, technology, engineering, and math facilities in our schools. And so I really think what I would say is, to people who have that perception, they should talk to parents of students who are in our schools, because when I talk to my neighbors who have their kids in our schools, they have wonderful things to say about our schools. They love our schools. And when I first moved here, just to give a personal anecdote, I don't have kids, but when I first moved here 8 years ago and bought a house, I didn't know whether I would decide to have kids or not. And I asked folks around about the schools, and I heard amazingly positive things. And if I had decided to have kids, I wouldn't have hesitated for a second to send my kids to our schools.
Well, it's a school district that has been improving and has done a pretty good job of late, I think, of promoting an image of itself as improving. I've got a long-term commitment to making sure that the school district prospers even better, and that is by bringing in the Boys and Girls Club into Peekskill. And we've spent a lot of time over the last 2 years helping to bring in the Boys and Girls Club, to fund the renovation of the Kiley Center, and to get the kids that tend to come into school a bit behind in different skill sets caught up early in the game, so that they have a record in the Boys and Girls Club of just pretty much 100% of the kids going through their system, graduating and going on to college or to the military or to a trade school. This year, all into college, I think, is the latest thing. So that's the initiative that I would like to push, but it's hard to overcome a perception, and I think they're actually doing a pretty good job because we hear a good vibe here in the community, and it's not like 10, 15 years ago where you might have just said, well, the parents are going to come up and then they're going to send their kids after they grow up a bit off to another school, up to a Catholic school or whatever. We don't hear that. So I can sense the improvements. I haven't a direct influence on what the school district does, but I do feel obligated to be responsible as part of the Peekskill Housing Authority to bring in the Boys and Girls Club and to give the kids that are behind or likely to be behind a leg up.
So what opportunities do you foresee or hope to create for students so that they are empowered, active learners that feel ownership of their academic journey to become active citizens of our community?
The first council, and I will take credit for a part of this along with the mayor, that really has worked with our school board. So in the past, there had been joint meetings, but it was really a meeting just getting together and not a lot has gotten done. We are partners with our school district. We share services, but we really are concerned about our children. So we're looking at internships for our children. We're looking at after school programs. And our biggest step is the Boys and Girls Club. Our mayor and this council has fought tooth and nail to bring in the Boys and Girls Club, who shows that 90% of the children who go through that program graduate from high school, go on to either college or secondary education, trade schools. We are working hand in hand to make sure that that happens, and that they work in partnership with our youth committees that we have, like our Youth Bureau, like our Arts 10566, like Creative Errors, like the school district. So this is really exciting. We are looking forward to this. It has more than just a recreation enhancement to it. It has a really steady, strong educational value to it. And our children need more than just the hours that they go to school. They need after school programs that concentrate on education and give them the opportunities. And we really feel that this is going to be an opportunity for every child in our community. And we're proud of that and really happy that that's coming to our city.
So, you know, your academic success, your success in life should not be based on your zip code that you were born in. Everyone, and we see that in Westchester so much. At least we're making progress on the funding, on the state funding part of things, the foundation aid. I think that we fall into the habit a little bit of saying, well, the mayor and the council is separate and the school board is separate, and that is true. But I think that there's more ways that our local government can advocate for our students, use their platform as political leaders to make a little more noise. A lot of this all happens up in Albany. I'm familiar with sort of how Albany works, how all that lobbying process works. And if I was mayor, I would be willing to sort of step out of my lane and yell and make noise about things that are on the state level. Aside from that, I think that there's better bridges that we can do as a community where we connect a school district with the business community, with the arts community, with this tech community that's now growing. There's such great things going on with the STEM in the schools, and there's lots of great tech things going on in our community. I think just a little more programs, mentorships, job opportunities. And then, you know, I think the reality also is not every student is going to go to college. We need to make sure that for the students that is right for, that Peekskill schools leave them prepared to go to college, but otherwise career training, vocational training, identifying what types of careers are available and make sense. And then logistical things, internet access to technology. These are educational issues that the city can improve on. And I'm really glad I was on the DRI local planning committee, and I'm really glad that there's going to be some access to broadband that will hopefully come out of that process. But you know, that's a municipal question or service or issue that then affects the education. So I think just, you know, a little bit more in the way of partnerships
That's a great question. I think we really need to, I think this, it's not just, it is, we need to make sure that our youth is engaged, but I think overall there is a lack of civic engagement or engagement in like public life in general in the city of Peekskill that we really want to change. We want to see more people being engaged in kind of the decision making that's taking place over at City Hall. We want people to feel empowered to get involved. And it really is important that we start engaging and reaching out to our youth to kind of set that example at a very young age. So to the extent, and I know that this is something that we had originally talked to as a city council about doing a couple of years ago, is allowing for one seat to be available to each city agency, each board, for someone, a person, a youth, someone under the age of 20 years or younger, is I think what we were looking at, to have a seat on each city board or city agency. Unfortunately, it's not something that we move forward with. And I think that it's something that we really need to take a look at and reinstate, or at least reconsider in stating. And I also think that working to build more kind of build spaces where the youth can have a dialogue around the decisions that need to be made. The one kind of the moment that that comes to mind for me right now is kind of the discussion around police reform and SRO officers. I know that there was originally recommendations being made about expanding the SRO program, but after having reached out to a number of students over at the Peekskill High School, it was made very clear that they did not feel like the SRO program itself needed to be expanded. It was more about the kind of people that they were hiring for this program, the trust that was being built, because the officer that they had on guard was someone who came through the Peekskill School District, who the kids knew. They knew their brother, they knew their family members, and being able to kind of understand the nuance around that relationship that's being built, and around how kids are feeling with as these programs that they are interacting with on a day-to-day basis. Like, these are the things and these are the kind of spaces that we need to build in order to be able to have these discussions, because they're not being had, and I'm afraid that decisions that are impacting the youth are being made without their voice being involved. So we have to push to make sure we're creating those spaces and that we're kind of making the time to reach out to the youth and bring them into the discussion, especially as it pertains to their well-being and as it pertains to their day-to-day life, right? Especially when it comes to schools, especially when it comes to the police. And I think that it's kind of sowing that seed is what's going to build community leaders of the future. And I'm already seeing that, especially with the youth of the youth chapter of the NAACP. But I do think that it has to happen kind of on a larger scale, and it's something that we have to definitely work towards.
Okay.
A great question. I think, should I win after the election, but even prior to that, I think finding ways to connect with different nonprofits, different organizations like the NAACP. I think building a bridge really between different organizations that do different things will be really helpful for our students. I know that there's been discussions around, having like a program for students to learn where they become, they're like they have a mentor and they're a mentee. So I think really finding those programs and going to the organizations that already do that is really necessary too. So I'm hoping that there's more of a bridge and more community building, because I think that's what requires us as elected officials, but also just individuals in the community. Bringing information to one another is important. And I think that requires communication and direct channels on being able to do that.
Thank you.
Information is key. A city, any municipality, it takes a lot to run a city, whether that's from, firemen to officers, to judges, city councilmen, garbage men, you know, I mean, you name it. So, you know, I would say, you know, probably, again, just working with the school district and, you know, making young people aware that, you know, you have a say, you know, and you have the power to you know, make your city into whatever it is that you want to make it into. I mean, we see people do it all the time with gentrification. You know, they come and they make it what they want it to be. So, you know, I would say, yeah, just again, information, you know, getting young people to understand how a municipality runs, and, you know, to show how, you know, they can be a part of that. You know, I think sometimes people, you know, get caught up in education and, you know, moving out and getting a job. But, you know, I guess just, again, getting people to understand that we need you here. You know, we need you local.
I've been working for, I don't know, a couple of years when we were part for the Peekskill Hispanic Community Court to one of the club, the Latino Cultural Club in the school. And I'm very glad to recommend to the NAACP to work with them when we have the census issue, and they came to work together with the grant to try to improve the census number. I think that was amazing. And I have to be honest, we just started last fall. There was a campaign to doing civic education. The campaign just say the trash doesn't walk by itself, and we have a teacher, we have a punk car, and we went to some Sundays to the riverfront park to just letting know the people what they should do. Because sometimes people start to complain about garbage. Oh, there's a lot of garbage. So you see the garbage can full, and the people just keep and drop the garbage in the same garbage can full. So, and you got another one just 15 feet away. So that's the idea. Just keep the garbage in your hand and drop it in another one. So, and I want to say that because now I got a depression. I mean, pressure, because I got a request. 3-year students, and they are very tough and smart. They are asking me to me, and I'm very happy for that because I never see that before in almost, I don't know, 5-6 years. They want to be a part for the community. They want to doing like some kind, not scholarship, like where we be. I don't have the program now created. I start to talk with somebody to like. How do you do I forgot the word, when people work some kind of time for no pay, but just for learn, like
internship.
Internship, yeah, thank you. They asked me for that. And now I really, in this moment, in the campaign, all the things that we had to do, I got a depression because I got one of those. She sent me 2 emails the same day, and I say I want to give it the right answer. So I think the student now they are watching change in the city for different reasons. I mean, they are seeing more activity, they are seeing more improvement, and they want to be part. And I think many organizations, they are asking for that. When you see like the Black Diamond and Mr. Madonna, well, it's a very active group. I mean, and you see you have a young man's a group working very hard to doing a lot of things for the school. When you see someone, the Latino cultural group, and the other one that has a scholarship, I think unfortunately because the pandemic, we are not seeing more young people get involved in different issues. But the thing is, try to work with give it the opportunity to be part. That's my goal, and I think we can have a more positive change when we give an opportunity to the young people participate. I mean, every good change in the history, most of the good change in the history in the war and in different countries is because just young people get involved. when we get older, unfortunately, that's the reality. We start to be more conservative. We start to be more afraid to don't make mistakes, and that's the reality. So, I was very active when I was young, and I like it. I love it when I see that it's something like that we need to push that young people to move forward and try to get done different things.
I mean, I have a lot of ideas about how to make students active participants, and some of it is already happening. I mean, I want to start by saying there's amazing work happening in our district right now, and I hope that one of the things our committee is going to be doing very soon is highlighting some of that work. But there's a task force on CRE, culturally responsive education, and students have been given a voice on that task force, and they are already starting to guide the conversation about how curriculum should be redeveloped to reflect their own history, which I think is amazing and is like the ultimate empowering thing for them to influence, right, in their school, their own curriculum. I have a lot of ideas about how to engage youth more broadly in the community, which I think will basically, create a very engaged community when they graduate from the school system. So I would love to get students engaged on committees and boards in local government. I think that they should have a seat at the table the way that we have a youth branch in their NAACP. I think that there should be youth represented on, the Parks Board and on the Conservation Advisory Council, and whether that, I think there are so many ways to approach it. And obviously it would be in partnership with the schools, but whether it's an internship, whether it's for credit, or whether it's they just have equal membership as anyone else, because this is their city and they are going to potentially settle down here. And these are decisions that are being made that are going to impact them above all else. So I think that is another way to really, for them to learn, to become empowered learners, and to become real stakeholders in our community and invested in it and invested in the success of it. So I think I'd start there. I can go on, but I won't go on much more.
It's the most wonderful thing I've seen. I've gone over to the Boys and Girls Club who talk about empowerment. It is their principal goal. It's not just to have good sports. It's not just to have after school activities. It's not just, but to get kids into a position to be responsible, supported, confident, able to get through the system in a way that they come out feeling stronger and not kind of run down by the way that they didn't do as well in one class or another. That's the Boys and Girls Club. And I don't want to be a broken record on it, but I worked for 10 years with troubled youth. And I can tell you that what the boys and girls do is exactly what the kids I worked with needed. They got some of that. And we have some of that in already going on in the recreation department and the youth bureau. But this can be a whole new level. If they open up now in 2023, I think is our goal, is to get them into position. What a change that's going to be for our kids. The kids that I always worry about that get left behind and then they get into trouble, then they don't graduate. Then it's so much harder to pick up kids when they've had a track record of getting behind in their studies all over the place. So I'm so delighted that we've got so far. We've gotten $4 million in grants. We've got a commitment from the Boys and Girls Club. We have a whole bunch of work being done to make sure that happens. But I'm sorry, it's almost the same answer as the first question, but it's really close to my heart that we bring this about.
The Health Committee is attuned to the fact that we are all concerned about COVID safety. We are all concerned about our community. And it was recently reported that the stats for Peekskill area may be 30% for having at least one immunization. Whereas the nation in one report showed that the nation at that same level is at around 50%, and Westchester County on the whole might be at 59%. So in our concern for that, the Health Committee has launched a program where we have small Zoom groups, a physician specialist participating, and people with familiar groups, perhaps a group from their own church or other pre-existing community organizations, where they might feel safe enough to ask the real questions that concern them. Small enough groups where they feel safe, small enough where they could ask a lot of questions, and small enough where they can ask their own question over and over until they get an answer that makes sense to them. So we're concerned about that. Other organizations in the town, in the city, are also concerned. So we're partnering with those other agencies. One that does counseling for COVID patients, another one that helps COVID patients actually get to immunization locations, and another that does mass education programs. So we're all approaching it a little differently. Hopefully, between and amongst all of these partners, we'll get our folks to the vaccine places. We just think that too many of our neighbors, friends, and family members have gotten sick, and at 30% immunization, many remain at risk. What will you do as a city council member, or what have you done to protect our residents from COVID?
Continue to do pop-up vaccinations. So we worked with Hudson Valley Healthcare to do one in the Kiley Center. Also having a mobile bus come in so that we could go directly to our seniors. So continuing to do that, really getting into the schools. I think our population in the school has been missed. And now that 12 to 17-year-olds can be immunized, to really work with the school district to get that information out there and partner with different private entities to have them come in and do the vaccinations. We did a lot during COVID, really to keep people apprised of what was going on, where they could get food, where they could get vaccinated, where they could get tested, including our own staff, making sure that our staff had accessibility to being tested. So we're, I hope, rounding the bend with COVID, but in terms of vaccination, we have a long way to go. And I really think it's all about education and, you know, getting people educated and getting them.
Right. Yeah, that's another great question, and something that, you know, attending NAACP meetings has sort of opened my eyes up to, that there are larger dynamics. There are a lot of dynamics in play when it comes to this sort of public health response. You know, another stat that I would mention is that 17% of Peekskill households don't have access to a car. So you're right, it has to be in the community, it has to be accessible. I think doing more to, and something that the NAACP did, I think, is bringing in respected doctors and healthcare professionals that people will trust, can relate to, letting them know that this is the right thing to do for our collective health. A public awareness campaign. Another thing that motivated me to run is that I don't think we're currently, as a city, reaching all of our residents. We're not doing enough in terms of translating and just general cultural awareness. So a public education campaign for sure. Just making sure that it's in the community, accessible. I think you're on the exact right track, partnering with trusted organizations, partnering with the churches, of course. I wonder if there's maybe some more cultural groups, maybe getting to the families through youth programs and more culture like that, where they're, you know, comfortable and trusting. But yes, you're bringing up really important issues, that there's access, there's trust, there's language, there's a lot of different barriers. And I don't know that we are thinking creatively in all those communications. My background, you know, I mentioned is nonprofit, and I'm in urban planning now, but it's been communications, it's been media. It's how to convey information from government to constituents. How does the council member get out to the public that there is a vaccination clinic in the community? So for me, communications is sort of really kind of at the center of what I do, aside from all the urban planning stuff as well. So I think Peekskill is trying to communicate better. They've finally gotten back on Twitter, for example, after years of not being on that platform, but there's a
So since the start of the pandemic, I think that it's really important that the city government play a critical role in communications, right? When the pandemic first hit, City Hall closed down, a lot of things closed down, and people felt like there was kind of a lack of communication of what was going on. And one of the things that I actually started was these weekly COVID updates where we were bringing New York Presbyterian Hospital, the Hudson River Healthcare, a number of other, we call these like stakeholder meetings, which people didn't like, but they were meetings of people pertinent to the community that were working on initiatives related to COVID-19. We didn't have the vaccine yet, but it was kind of a space in which we could all talk about the issues we were facing, updates we had, and ways in which the community could engage. And I felt that that was kind of a really great way in which we could kind of open that line of communication. But I do feel that those lines have not have kind of closed up in a way, and I think that we as leadership really need to be taking an active role in communicating to the public about the just educating folks about the facts on the vaccine, the facts about this virus, and the reasons why it's so important for a majority of us to really get vaccinated as soon as possible. I know that there's a number of resources that have been shared by the state government. I myself, my full-time job working with New York Immigration Coalition, I have held a number of meetings with stakeholders, the Department of Health, with more of our immigrant community, working with service providers such as Neighbors Link, Catholic Charities, to specifically dispel the myths in a language accessible way. We tend to do these meetings in Spanish. So that's one way in which I individually have tried to kind of bridge that gap that does really exist. But these are kind of things that I think our city government should be taking up, that more of our council should be participating in, and that we really should be prioritizing. And I think that there's a lot of lessons learned from this that we'll have to make sure we hopefully remember, not only remember, but kind of memorialize this time around, so we don't make these steps or these mistakes the next time. And communication is absolutely going to be a critical piece in that. But also, I don't think we're necessarily tapping into the network and resources that are available here in our city. I know that we have like a COVID resource doc on the city page, but there should be kind of more active communications about the different pop-up clinics that exist, the availability for vaccines. I've heard from so many folks, there's a lot of confusing information out there about, like, people say they can't get an appointment for a vaccine, but I've called HRH Care myself, and they'll offer you an appointment for later that day. So kind of making sure that we're delivering this news in a way that's trustworthy, because people keep hearing things from social media and from and no one knows what to believe. So then you come out with this perception that there's a lack of availability when that's just not the case. So changing that perception, increasing that communication, but making it consistent, so that it's not just ad hoc or like once in a while when there's a need to communicate, but so there's regular communication, so it's expected and people know to look for it, I think is something that we need to build towards. And it's something that I hope that we can work on as we make it a priority, hopefully, if we're all elected.
This is where what I do for work, it has come really, really in handy, because I've been able to see how cities and municipalities can work with county government to ensure that they get what they need. And so one thing that I can do as a city official is be able to work with those on a county level. For example, our current county legislator is Legislator Colin Smith, who I happen to work for. And being able to reach out to our elected officials who are sitting at a higher level on the county level, in this instance, will be really, really, really useful, because they are the ones who are able to help bring, for example, like pop-up vaccine areas. They were doing it before when they were having testing sites. So they have the ability and the resources and the financial resources really to be able to organize something where we can have individuals either come, where we're having some sort of campaign on explaining, you know, why we need to get vaccinated, the need to get vaccinated, maybe even talking about some of the concerns people have, right? I know that there are unfortunately people who are very concerned about the vaccine. And I think if we can find a way where people feel comfortable enough to ask them, where they don't feel like they're being ostracized, I think will be really useful, right? It's not what you say, but it's how you say it. And I think that that goes a long way. So I think being able to bring in the experts to our community, being able to engage and have this full-on campaign where we say, you know what, there's nothing wrong with the vaccine, you know, can we have experts talk about that? But really it's being able to work with the county, having them bring us the resources we need, and they're a huge help in this kind of situation. And so I think being able to fully use those resources are really important.
I would say that, everyone should get vaccinated. I'm never going to suggest to anyone that they shouldn't get vaccinated. So let me just start there. But yeah, I mean, it sounds like, you're doing a ton of work on the topic. So, I definitely would, want to work with you, Jess, on helping raise the awareness on a citywide level. Again, it's a tough thing. It's the culture, it's America, and, Black people or Black and brown, there's a reason for that hesitancy. And it's valid. So, I would say, again, just bringing the information to the forefront to explain the mRNA vaccine to people and show them how it's very much so different from vaccines of the past. But yeah, as far as, 30%, yeah, and again, 50%, I would imagine under, with certain demographics, I wonder out of the 30% in Peekskill, how many of those are whites versus, or classify themselves as whites versus Blacks? Would you say, Jess? I'm sorry.
Great question. I would have to find out. I'll have to do my research on that. That's a great question too.
I would imagine in certain pockets, the numbers are higher,
right?
Versus, so I think, when it comes to us, it's tough. It's tough.
Mm-hmm.
It's tough.
I agree.
But I would say that if you have any underlying conditions, if you're dealing with, any type of weight issues or inflammation, diabetes, anything like that, like, you definitely should get your vaccine, just so if you were to come in contact with COVID, you're going to lessen your chances of being hospitalized. Doesn't mean you still can't catch COVID. It's just help you out. Your body's already had a taste of it. So I would say definitely, work with people like yourself. And again, just educate people on it. But it's a tough thing. It's a tough thing. Culturally, it's a tough thing.
As you know, the Health Committee has been focusing on educating the Peekskill community in hopes of helping them to move towards being vaccinated against COVID-19. So we thought we'd use, small group discussions with a doctor and allow them to ask their questions about COVID and the available vaccines. We've partnered with various agencies, including New York Presbyterian Hudson Valley for our speakers. We also have Papa, because we plan to move to the houses of worship to host these events. And we will also have New York Project Hope to give us, counseling for residents who have difficulties coping with COVID. We have volunteers from COVID Angels who will help them to get to vaccines if they so wish, and even partnered with Sun River Health for a larger scale education. Now, having said that, the national average for adults vaccinated against COVID-19 is approximately 50%. And recently we were told that in Peekskill, that number is approximately just over 30%. So that's quite alarming and makes us concerned about our neighbors. So as a member of the City Council, what will you do to improve this concerning lag in our COVID vaccination rate?
The first thing, I think that number, I heard that number is more higher than 30%. Yesterday, the city manager, when they do the weekly report, if I'm not wrong, he say 47% now we have already vaccinated in the city. I think we were like the high number in the county. I think now we have I don't know, was White Plains or some place over there that there are higher than us, and you know, like in the population. So if I can mention it to you how we are working with that, the first thing, providing information. I was trying to working, but I was working with Fredo Moreira, the health center, to provide information. Like many people here, like do you remember how it was approved before? Like a grocery, different people for what kind of job they have. It was already. Now we have everybody. With the counting, I was expecting, and I did a conversation with Father Esteban in Assumption Church. He got a lot of place over there for many things. So now we are waiting for some conversation that we start to talk with the county to maybe doing another open walking for vaccinated, and just try to, you know, letting know the community how is the reality to, if we don't get vaccination, it's sad. I mean, people, I can tell you, I mean, we have two very close to my people, business owner and a friend of mine, they just passed away 1 month ago and 1 week ago, and very young people. One was 40 years old, and the other one, he was working for the town, your town. He didn't want to get the vaccine for all that taboo and all that people talking about, and unfortunately he didn't get it, and passed away. In the last conversation that we had with him, it was he was trying to get a vaccine for his daughter that is especially it's sad. I mean, I unfortunately we cannot force. I don't think that's going to be the good idea to force people like, oh, it's a mandatory thing, because you have to respect like the decision for the people. But I think with the entire community, we are working to educate the people and show how is it positive if we get more people vaccinated.
Okay. Thank you.
Doing a better job than I can think of. I mean, basically, we have pushed for masks. I mean, we have done a whole program to make sure that we could keep some businesses functioning with outside dining. The whole bunch of things that were kind of stressing, keeping the place kind of from collapsing. I didn't know the level was at 30%. That's a bit of a shocker to me to be, you can tell right off the bat, this is not my area of expertise. We deal with the county health department on this. We've been back and forth with them, and we set up a special vaccination sites. We did get a whole whack of our seniors to get vaccinated at the Kiley Center. That was an initiative that everybody worked on to make sure it happened. So it's hit and miss as far as I could say in terms of ways in which the city government has facilitated, or if they've done it, then it's something that I don't know about. I'll be frank with you. I do consider it vital that we all get vaccinated. My focus has been more and more on how do we reopen safely. And that can't happen very well with such a low rate of vaccinations. But and if there's, I really don't have a better answer than what you're already doing, which is working in small groups and trying to get people that are more locally based to be able to work directly with the people to build the confidence that the folks will actually take the vaccine.
And I just want to say, I mean, I've been watching everything you guys have been doing, and you've done just such an incredible job. And I sat through, you know, some of your presentations that took place in our NAACP meetings, and I saw people change their minds, you know, while listening to these presentations. I saw people start off saying, I'm not getting the vaccine. And I saw them after 1 hour say, actually, I might, or I'm going to. And that's just incredible. And it's proof that what you're doing works. So I would, you know, really work to continue on a city level the work that you've started as volunteers, and provide resources necessary to scale that work in any way possible. I think it's clear that community conversations are the way to go here. You know, people who are still hesitant about getting vaccines really need to hear from people they trust, from people who speak the same language as them, you know, and we know that we have a large population of Spanish speakers in Peekskill, and we need to really, as a priority across the board as a city, make everything accessible to our Spanish speaking community, and in all of the most spoken languages in Peekskill, but we know Spanish is the most, you know, the most second common spoken language. So I would start there. I would also say that bringing vaccination clinics to people is another part of it. So part of it is like what you're saying, advocacy and really, you know, explaining the science to people and demystifying it. And then part of it is just getting people to a place where they can get a vaccine easily, right? Like we live in a dense city where not everyone has a car and not everyone has the, you know, the fortune to be able to walk far, right? Like to have the physical ability to walk far. So bringing vaccine clinics to people, we have a lot of people living in dense apartment buildings. They should be prioritized, you know? I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I shouldn't have had access to a vaccine as somebody who lives in a house before somebody living in a dense apartment building, where the second you open your door, you're exposed to air that other people are breathing, right? Like you don't have the luxury of space. So I would really lobby our elected officials for vaccination clinics, and I would prioritize people who are living in the densest areas of our city, in the densest buildings, people living in our public housing, who just, you know, are the most vulnerable people, people who are most at risk of getting COVID and at risk of being really harmed by it.
With the growing amount of development inside of Peekskill, and with the growing amount of market prices for rentals, we would like to know, what are your views for inclusionary zoning here in Peekskill? Also, I'm sorry, I got like three parts of it. What are your views about gentrification and the pricing out of Black and brown people here in Peekskill?
So we start with the pricing out. You have to have a balance. So as we're bringing in affordable housing, we need to bring in market housing as well. And that's because we need to be able to pay for our services. So if we're, you know, as we're growing, we need more services. We need more police officers. We need more DPW. We need more fire. We need to be able to support our school system to make sure that our children have everything that they need so that we can work hand in hand with the schools. If we do everything that is low income or affordable, we have to be able to balance it with market. That being said, the council just had the county come in and give us an analysis for affordable housing. And that was in our last meeting. So now what we're looking at is the AMI for Peekskill residents, which is 57,000 based on what the county is at 120,000. So we're now looking to do an affordable endorsement to our code. So we're making legislation to go into the code. And what that means is we will now look at affordable housing and ask each developer that's coming in to do a certain percentage of affordable units in that development. So if a person is coming in and they're doing 100 units, 10% of those would have to be at affordable. But at affordable, no longer taking 60% of the Westchester County AMI, but using up to 100 or 125% of the Peekskill AMI, which would mean not only would we be doing low-income housing, but we really would start to target the person who makes too much money for a subsidy, but doesn't make enough to afford market rate. So you're looking at that person from anywhere from $40,000 to $75,000. And that's where we really lack housing in Peekskill. So we're really working hard to do that so that we don't push families out. My children don't live here, they live in Poughkeepsie. They all have degrees and work hard. So I realize that there's a need for housing for everyone. The only problem with that is once you start demanding developers take 30% of their units and try to make them affordable, you lose the developers. There's nowhere in the county that anyone is doing above the 10%, maybe 15%, and that comes with a certain buyback. You also have to look at what the developer is getting in terms of funding. My thing is to look for developers who are not looking for low-income funding, that are willing to actually commit to the city and actually build. They can build, but they're not building with subsidies, and they can build if they're really committed to the community and make things happen. I'm talking to someone right now who's looking at doing 100 units of workforce housing, but that's because he's using his money to do it. He's not looking for state and federal funding. So I'm looking more at developers who really want to commit here and who want to build what we need here versus the mass person who's coming in and just lining their pockets.
Yeah, great questions, and they're sort of intertwined. So inclusionary zoning, so meaning that if a developer wants to build, say, 100 units, he would have to build of market rate, a certain amount would have to be priced below that. So the current council is talking about a long overdue ordinance that would require 10%. I don't think that goes far enough. I think we need to look at 20%. It can be a mix. It can be a mix of different price levels, but I think that we really need to see what is the maximum that we can demand without scaring away investment. I'm a big believer that growth can be good. Peekskill can benefit from this growth if it is done in a careful, well-planned way. So inclusionary zoning, it's just one tool, however, in the toolbox. Just adopting, especially a 10% ordinance, would not be close to doing enough to address your second concern with gentrification. So we need that. We need tenant protections, but we also need to be creative and start thinking about maybe partnering with a nonprofit to build affordable housing that is affordable to people living in Peekskill. So a big problem is we used a Westchester area median income to do these calculations. So I end up talking to residents in Bowman Towers who see a big project going up on Main Street, and they say, is that affordable for me? And then they find out that they don't make enough money to qualify, that the limits are too high. And that's another decision that this council made. They could have pushed for lower affordability in 645 Main Street. So I think we need to look at maybe infill development downtown in places that make sense, where we could add some housing on city properties that are currently underutilized. We could partner with nonprofits to do this. That way, instead of 10 units here, 10 units there, we could find a way to get 100 units in one go in an appropriate location that adds to our city, gets more people downtown, but is in a good location. So, so gentrification, the price of housing, the cost of living, these are big concerns. These are absolutely big concerns. It comes down to supply and demand. It comes down to our policies, and we can take steps to address that.
Yeah, no, those are two really important questions, and housing is an issue that is one of my top issues for this coming election. So the council is currently considering an inclusionary zoning ordinance. And we recently had Rose Noonan from the Housing Action Council come to the City Council with some data. And the data that she provided had been the data that I have been reiterating to the City Council for years now, since the Westchester Housing Needs Assessment was published back in November of 2019. And that is the fact that the formula that developers often use when approaching municipalities about building or including affordable housing in their developments is often the county annual median income, which from what Rose clarified to my colleagues is close to double of what the Peekskill annual median income is. So that means when you're talking about 60%, when folks talk about affordable housing and they're talking about 60% of the AMI, they're talking about an AMI that's already double of what people on average in Peekskill are making. So 60% is not at all affordable. And I think that when we talk about affordable housing, we have to acknowledge that this reality, that we are working with a formula that is not suitable for the city of Peekskill. So a recommendation, one that I have been making, but that has now been made by Rose Noonan, who we have hired to kind of come up with these different menu of options, is that when we approach the developers and when we're talking about inclusionary zoning, which for folks who are not very familiar, inclusionary zoning is essentially an ordinance that details what percentage allocation of any development built in a municipality is allocated or put aside for affordable housing. And affordability can be defined by the municipality, and it's usually put in terms of contract or wherever they end up putting the term. Sometimes it's in a special permit. And in our case, we are looking to put forth an inclusionary zoning ordinance. And what I would like to see is a 20% affordable housing inclusionary set aside that is actually affordable to Peekskill residents. So this is not just a 20% set aside with using the county annual median income. It would have to be 20% of any development built be set aside for affordable units with an affordability that is comparable to the local Peekskill annual median income, so that rents are truly seen as affordable to residents who are living here and not just general residents of the county, which tend to be individuals who are making a higher income. So I think that that's a really big difference. And I think that that's like, and I'm sorry to get into kind of the nitty gritty, but it's important that we understand because unfortunately what my colleagues have been pushing for is using the county AMI, and they're actually pushing back against the suggestion that Rose Noonan is making, and is saying that we should not be using the local AMI and that we should be maybe going up towards 125% of the Peekskill annual median income or 150%, which again, if we're 150%, when you have nearly half of our population making less than $50,000 a year, is just kind of it's tone deaf, and it's not truly meeting the needs that currently exist for tenants here in the city of Peekskill. So I'm supportive of 20% inclusionary zoning, but it has to be at the local Peekskill annual median income. And then to speak to your second question about how I feel about gentrification, it's a problem. The housing crisis is real. It's something that we're facing, all of New York State is facing to different degrees, right? We're definitely facing it here in Westchester County, and Peekskill in particular, and this isn't just, you know, my feelings, this is backed up by statistics that were published by Westchester County, again, in this Westchester Needs Assessment, and you can look it up, they have it on their website, and this is data from November of 2019. We, as the city of Peekskill, actually have the highest rate of foreclosure. So this housing crisis is not just impacting tenants, renters, it's also impacting homeowners. We have the highest rate of foreclosure, along with having the highest percentage of tenants that are considered rent burdened. What that means, or actually not just rent burdened, but severely rent burdened. And what that means is that nearly 40% of renters, and we are a majority renter population here in the city of Peekskill, are paying over half of what they're bringing in income on a monthly basis towards their monthly rent. That is unsustainable. HUD's recommendation is that you should not be paying more than 30% of your income Otherwise, it's completely kind of outside of what you can afford given the cost of living. But these are the circumstances that so many people in the city of Peekskill are facing. And there's policies that we can be putting forth to protect tenants against these things. But we have, unfortunately, there's been a lot of pushback. Things like the Emergency Tenant Protection Act. This is something that Austining attempted to pass a couple years back. Unfortunately, it was rolled back because there was a lot of pushback from the real estate industry. It was something that I had brought up when Austining was looking into it and was considering it at the city council for us to consider. But because of the contention that it had drew in Austining, my colleagues did not want to touch it. But the reality is that if we were to instate the Emergency Tenant Protection Act, it means that buildings that were built before 1974, buildings that have over 6 or more units, would be considered rent stabilized and rent controlled. And for folks who have ever lived in the city, that makes a huge difference. That means that your landlord cannot raise your rent over a certain percentage every time you go to renew your lease. And when you have luxury apartments being built in your community, landlords are going to be incentivized to raise your rents if they know that there's a landlord right down the street who's charging $700 more for a 1-bedroom than you are, right? So that's why it's so important to move policies like these forward. There's also the Good Cause Eviction Act that we would like to move forward as well, which would again make it so renter or landlords cannot increase your rent by a certain percentage unless there's a good cause. So landlords, if they're making big improvements and there's a reason to raise rents, that's one thing. But a landlord should not be allowed to raise your rent just because it's time to renew your lease and because they want to be more comparable to what the market currently stands as.
Okay.
So those are just a couple of policies, but there are a number of other policy and solutions that we're putting forth. And I don't want to rant more about this. Is an issue I really care about, as you can see, but definitely check out our platform on progressforpeekskill.com.
This is also an area that I feel like I don't have enough expertise, and I would like to be able to learn more about them as well. With regards to the second question, I think that Peekskill can have nice things, but it doesn't mean that people need to get displaced because we want nice things. People deserve to have a good, healthy environment. And unfortunately, I think, our city experiences a lot of, for example, we see a lot of trucks who drive through the city, right? And that contributes to low quality air. And it's unfortunate because, like I said, most communities that face these environmental issues that, that really just kind of overlap one another. Unfortunately, a lot of Black and Brown communities bear that burden. And I think being able to find solutions where we can still have nice things. For example, if we're going to build more development, right? What kind of housing do we want? Can we build real affordable housing that's going to really benefit the community and be affordable to people? So I think when we have those kind of conversations, we should ask ourselves, how is it going to benefit everybody? And are the people who are coming here capitalizing on the fact that we have a diverse community? I read an article recently where one of the developers who wanted to come to Peekskill, who had proposed a development near the waterfront, was talking about how diverse this community is, right? But if there isn't a push to make sure that that development is creating jobs here locally, for example, then I think that that's a loss. And I think if you're in city government and you can dictate that conversation, you absolutely should. And so I think that there's a need really just for leadership to be clear on what it is that they're looking for and how they see the city building. And so for me, really, it's about being able to have nice things, but making sure that no one is being displaced because of it. So we should be very careful with the type of development that we're bringing in, how Peekskill is growing, and ensuring that everybody in the community is really going to have, going to benefit from the growth that Peekskill is growing into.
Well, can you just elaborate on the inclusionary zoning laws?
Yes, inclusionary zoning laws is basically laws in which developers that come inside town would have to set aside a certain percentage of their rental space for affordable homes.
Yeah, I'm definitely for that. I think that the issue comes in is where the funding for the developer you know, where it came from. Did it just get dark? Let me just see here. I think that's the issue, you know, that a lot of us, you know, we don't, I don't know, either we don't speak about it, we don't know about it, you know, who knows what motivates people with these narratives, but I'm definitely for that. But I'm for Peekskill first. You see, a lot of times, you know, we fight for, you know, certain opportunities, but the opportunities are not geared for Peekskill, people of Peekskill. You know, these are opportunities that are for everyone, right? So yeah, you can get a developer to do this inclusionary zoning practice, but if he's able to market it to the state or to the county, I mean, yeah, it's great. You know, I say still put it in there, but you know, we have to figure out a way how to, you know, structure these deals where the people of the city are actually benefiting from it. And it's not just something that just looks good, you know, on face value. You know, gentrification, I think that, you know, making things look better is, you know, who's gonna disagree with that? No one gets up in the morning and says, I want to look horrible today, right? So everyone wants to look their best. And be their best. We all should, right? But you know, as far as people getting priced out, you know, again, it's another thing where you know we can feel a way about a certain thing, but then you know you look at certain data, and the data doesn't reflect the feeling about it. You know, there's a lot of moving parts when it comes to that. You know, I mean, I wouldn't just say it's just a developer. You know, the culture of the city is changing. I feel like you know, right now we're probably going through a second wave of gentrification, in my opinion. I think Peekskill has already went through its first wave.
How black and price, you're talking about housing, no? Yes. That was I mean, that's really good question. I remember the 2017, I had the opportunity to participate in my first forum debate in my entire life. It was an NAACP debate. And I remember that I received a questionnaire, 5 questions. One, it was about the youth. And the other one, it was about housing and the discrimination. And I am very, very glad, very proud to say that many of those answers I have the opportunity with the team, with the Common Council to get done the majority. And it was about housing. One of the proposals that I did in that time, it was when the people cannot pay taxes for their own property, they lose the taxes, but the city had to appropriate. They call in-rent house, and they go to auctions. So that's the law. I mean, if you, for any reason, you cannot pay your taxes, and then past time, you keep in, behind. One time the city is going to take that property. So unfortunately, and from the experience that we see in the city, that auctions, many people and even absent landlords, they bought the houses because they have a cash money, they have more money for that. My suggestion, and we did it the first time we did the auction, it was to give you the opportunity to first home buyers to separate to other people, to have the opportunity to buy a house in that kind of auction. We did it, and I remember that it was a lot of for the staff in the city, like, no, because this is complicated, blah, 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 blah. But we got the support for the entire Common Council, and then we got more people. They were saying that sometimes not too many first home buyer and go to buy a house. We got more people who is registered as a first home buyers, and then we assigned one house for that, and there was another house to one of the first home buyers to buy. I mean, he didn't have the opportunity to buy that one that was assigned for first home buyer, but he had the opportunity to buy another one. And that was very, very amazing thing. And now we have a discussion now in the city. I introduced and I say I because I was the person who bring the discussion to introduce the affordable housing ordinance. I mean, before the former city manager left, I asked to him how we can do it. He brought to us an idea how he did in the Villa or Osini when he was a city manager over there. So, and then we were not agreed to start to that discussion, but some case came and that discussion came back again. And I have the opportunity to say, well, this is the time to be talking about that. And we are talking about to introduce the, well, we're gonna approve one ordinance that we don't have it here. At least every, that's the goal. I mean, at least 10% for every new developer had to be affordable. And that's another one that I brought the idea to also, to maybe for all residential house that we're going to maybe sell an auction when the city take property for that. I would like to change that and have maybe a lottery for low income people who can buy as for low price and doesn't have to be by auction. I mean, that's another thing that I brought in that can be in discussion in the Common Council now.
Okay. All right. Thank
And
you.
one just about gentrification.
Okay.
Gentrification is a reality in many places. I don't want to say that no every place is like something like people may be planning to do, and I want to say that here in Peekskill because when you got somebody asking about the school and the procession. When you got a good school, when you got a safety city, when you got a transportation, when you got a business, I mean, when you got your own city, your own town is going to be much better and much better. Much people is gonna try to live in that city, and you're gonna put a lot of pressure to the price for the renter and everything. I mean, unfortunately, that's the reality, and I think we are maybe having that experience here because all the things that I said, the good thing that I think we have it now in Peekskill. Safety, good school, people want to come to live here, people want to come to the restaurant to make a business. I mean, there's a lot of good things to happen, so.
Our platform is really built around including affordable units and new developments and also, protecting rent control programs to the extent possible. We are advocating for 20% to answer the second part of your first question. There's talk now, just to clarify, in the past, there has been no ordinance for any percentage of affordable to be included. It's at 0 by law. Developers can be asked or requested to include affordable, but there is no mandate currently. There is now talk about 10%. And I would advocate for 20, and I would advocate, to even push it higher than 20, but I mean, people think that 20 is like super radical and crazy. And I don't think that that's true. I think there are examples of 20% in other cities. And I do think that, like I said earlier, developers want to come here. I do not believe that using fear of developers walking away is an excuse to keep that number down. And I would try and prove that wrong to the extent possible. And that connects to gentrification. I mean, people are moving here, right? People are getting priced out of New York City as well. It's going to happen. And I think that, we need to protect affordable housing and, zoning for affordable units is one way to do that in new developments. But another way to do that is to bring legislation like the Emergency Tenants Protection Act, which you know, really applies to buildings built before, I think, 1974 of 6 units or more, making sure that people who are living in older buildings don't get unfair rent hikes. Because as these luxury apartments are going up, and they are, right? There's luxury apartments are going to go up on Central Avenue. They're going to be $2,700 a month for a 1 or 2 bedroom, right? People living in other places are going to face rent hikes, you know, because landlords are going to say, well, you know, if they're getting 2,700 for those, I can get a lot more than the, you know, the 1,000 that I've been getting all these years. So really, you know, making sure that rents are not unfairly hiked, and that, you know, people can have, you know, form tenants associations, and, you know, that we are also protecting our public, people living in public housing. Is another big piece of it. I think we have a lot of residents living in public housing. Public housing is facing possible privatization. We need grants, and, you know, we need government grants that will go towards, you know, upgrading and protecting our public housing stock, so people don't get forced out.
You know, sometimes you look at particular needs within a jurisdiction like Peekskill, and you have to look at a broader context. How does Peekskill fit into the whole of Westchester County? And I'm on the county planning board, and I've been at this for like 40 years, working on housing programs in Peekskill and working with the county to improve program delivery to meet the needs of those that are lacking affordable housing. So within the context of Peekskill, we have inclusionary zoning. We have multifamily zoning. We have a lot of affordable housing that we've built over the years. We have more that's under construction. We are in favor of affordable housing, but also market rate housing. And yet at the same time, we're looking at an ordinance to set aside 10% of the units as affordable for even a market rate development. So that's the question. Well, sorry, that's question 1. The question 2 was?
I'm sorry, what are your thoughts or your views on gentrification and the pricing out of Black and brown people in Peekskill?
Yeah, there has been an increase, particularly in, well, both, I guess, in rental and home ownership. That's a problem for all Black and brown and everyone. And I guess I would say it affects folks at the lower economic level more. And it also affects people of color, because there's always been a pattern of people being discriminated against, having a lesser opportunity for a good apartment. Back in the day when I was running the Section 8 program for the city, we had a wonderful family went out looking for an 2-bedroom apartment, and went to Crossroads, and they were African-American, and there was no 2-bedroom apartment available. So I went out and applied for the same apartment, even though I had my own apartment, and I found the unit. So then we sat down with the landlord and management and said, you can't be doing this. And we got that straightened out. I think you find Crossroads Apartments is pretty well integrated. So in terms of not discriminating against people of color in the housing choice, I think we can all work on that, and we have worked on it, and it's still a problem, to be frank. But on the other side of the coin, I think it's a basic problem of there are just not enough available apartments. And so we have to stimulate new development, and it should be both affordable and market rate. And then we want to make sure that folks that live here already have an opportunity to move into those apartments. And that's a goal that's worth working on. Gentrification, I think, is protected in Peekskill a bit, because we have a lot of affordable housing units. It's well over 1,000, with another couple hundred in the offing that don't, whoops, I don't know if I can shut that off. Oh, well, anyway, sorry about that. That have require that they be held for affordable families that are a set median income. So if you wanted to move into a lot of our apartment buildings and you were middle income, you would not be allowed to. So we have already set aside a good number. I don't know what the total number, but well over 1,000 of the units. You can only be of a certain income limit to move into it in the first place. So gentrification is held at bay a bit by that, but there is upward pressure from people coming out of New York City. And we need to keep an eye on it. We also need to watch out for people that wind up having their properties foreclosed. Councilman Fernandez and I have been talking about if the city were to take properties, 1 and 2 family houses, and not just market them off or sell them off through an auction or something, but set them aside for first-time home buyer opportunities for people that don't presently have a home that they own, and set aside that thing. So there's some tools like that, but gentrification is partly just the outside pressure upon us from New York City people moving out.
Okay.
If elected, what would you do to lessen Peekskill's carbon footprint?
Our environment is very important. We have worked with the Honeywell project to make sure that we are reducing our carbon footprint by 11, I don't have the number with me, but it was a huge number, by changing gas systems in the library, by changing windows in City Hall, those kinds of things. Also asking developers, as they're looking at coming in, what kind of sustainable energy they could use versus the normal that's there. Doing solar, doing geothermal, whatever the new technology that is out there that they can put into their systems to make it healthy. Water, our water department runs testing yearly. There are mandatory reports that we have to go through with the state. They come in and test, and we make sure that we do those tests and those are made public. In terms of companies like Wheelabrator, we work with Wheelabrator to make sure that they're tested, which we did just a couple of years ago, to make sure that they're in line with the state guidelines, to make sure that there's no over emissions coming out. So those are things that are important, but also have an open air space. So our parks, so the people are able to be outdoors and enjoy our parks. So as you know, on the Parks Advisory Board, we do a lot in our parks. We've just gotten $1 million grant for the Depew Park. We've just got a $318,000 grant for Pugsley Park, and I believe a $200,000 grant for Monument Park. So those will be spaces that we will really spruce up and make really nice. The irrigation system in Depew Park will be done on the field. It'll be a new track system. A lot of money spent in our parks to make sure that people have outdoor space to breathe and live. So we take that very seriously, and I take that very seriously.
To clarify, I'm not on the CAC, but I am a big fan of their work, and I watch their work carefully. So absolutely.
Oh, okay.
And through Peekskill Walks, we have a lot of work that does overlap with environmental causes. You know, whether it's through a tree ordinance is something that has been long delayed. We need to get that in, and something like trees helps on the environmental side. It helps also on the safe street side, because if you line the street with trees, it actually slows drivers down. So pushing that, but bigger picture, you're exactly right. Peekskill has been bearing the brunt, unfair burden for a long time now. And look, I think that a city like Peekskill does need to do its fair share, absolutely. But Peekskill's been doing more than that for a long time now. I think it's time for Peekskill sort of just to stand up, you know, and say that our health, our residents matter just as much as surrounding communities, and we need to look at how much we're shouldering. So I think it's time now to start a conversation around Wheelabrator. Now, I'm not going to promise that we are going to shut down Wheelabrator, but this is the highest polluter in our county by 6-fold, and it's burning trash from all other communities, and we are ending up with high asthma rates and the impact. So something like that's going to take 10 years, or at least. There's a lot of jobs and factors at stake, but we need to at least start having those conversations. Same thing with the trucks on Main Street. We're the only Main Street where we have endless tractor trailers going from somewhere else to somewhere else. We get none of the tax revenue. We're stuck fixing the roads, breathing in that pollution. If you look at a map of where pedestrian incidents and things happen, our Main Street corridor is not as safe as it should be. So I would like Peekskill to say, okay, we can't eliminate trucks on Main Street, but is there a way that the state can do upgrades elsewhere to reroute a lot of that traffic? Just, you know, access to food, something that really came out during the pandemic and that I'm really seeing is food insecurity. and families in Peekskill should not be worried about how they're going to pay their rent and how they're going to buy food. And unfortunately for many families, and I think Peekskill, and there's groups that are working on that. And I think we need to really lift those organizations up, connect residents with them a little bit better, encourage those types of little neighborhood projects. A little community compost or garden can really go a long way towards the overall collective health. So I think thinking really small, literally street trees, and thinking really big, and sort of leaving no answers off the table, but really Peekskill has to just start having these conversations.
So we here in Peekskill, there is a lot of money that we're leaving on the table because we're not pursuing different state and federal programs that exist that are incentivizing municipalities like us to lessen our carbon footprint. Being involved with programs like the Climate Smart Communities, for example, is definitely a priority of myself and my team. In order to be able to participate in the Climate Smart Communities program, we would have to establish a Climate Smart Community Task Force, as well as a Climate Smart Community Coordinator. And then the task force and coordinator would be responsible for creating a plan to create something such as a greenhouse gas inventory, which would do exactly that. It would start to track ways in which we can start to lessen our carbon footprint, but also plan ahead to see how we can start planning towards and creating or starting our electric fleet, which we have not yet really even discussed, but moving towards more kind of greener programs, ensuring that we're putting forth energy stretch codes that also incentivize future developments to build in a greener, more cost-effective ways. This is a way in which we as a population together can also lessen our carbon footprint that are kind of like outside of our city buildings. And then there's also the impacts that local polluters are having in our communities that absolutely impact our city residents. The Wheelabrator, the garbage incinerator that we have right here in Peekskill, is the #1 polluter in all of Westchester County by over 6 times. It's one of the big reasons why we're considered an environmental justice community, aside from also having, you know, the 242-inch fracked gas pipelines and what was the oldest operating nuclear power plant right in our backyard. And we need to start thinking about how we can phase out these really antiquated facilities that continue to burden us with this pollution and continue to accelerate the impacts of climate change. This is obviously not something we can change overnight. It's not something we can change probably even in an administration, right? Like, it's going to take way more than 4 years. But moving towards programs that decrease waste in general, such as putting forth composting programs, food scrap programs, are ways in which we can kind of work towards that reality, but also seeking out other facilities that can resolve this issue of waste in a way that's much greener, that does not create such of a carbon footprint, is something that we also as city leaders should be looking into, and is something that we have included in our platform to look into, and are committed to hopefully starting the process of having a discussion within our community about, so we can really reckon with the fact that this has been a big burden for our community and for a very long time, and start to see how we can move towards a future where the Wheelabrator no longer exists, but in a way that creates stability and creates more jobs for the people who would lose their jobs if it were to close down, because of course that's something that we have to keep in mind. And just because we're closing one facility, it doesn't mean that we're not looking to open up another one that will create better jobs, greener jobs, safer jobs that are sustainable and provide a livelihood as well.
One of the things that we have definitely discussed is being able to form a committee. I'm somebody who truly believes in community building and relationship building, and so To me, it's about bringing different perspectives and different individuals to the table, individuals who maybe have not been welcomed before or who didn't know how to get involved. So I think doing outreach in the community is really important, number one. But two, forming a committee, an environmental committee here in the city to address these issues and to take on, you know, the coming discussions around how can we build better infrastructure that's more environmentally friendly, finding different forms of transportation or creating more walkable spaces throughout the city, I think will be really important. So we definitely have a huge opportunity to be able to address these issues. And so I'm hoping that we'll be able to form a proper committee where we can address them and then be able to put them into policies that are going to, you know, come to fruition.
Juice bars. There needs to be a juice bar on every corner. Okay, we need to make people, you know, you gotta become vegan. All right. Yeah. Again, looking at, you know, whatever policy that can be enacted in the city of Peekskill. You know, I'm a vegan. My family's vegan. So, you know, just my, you know, as far as the conversation about the carbon footprint or environmental, you know, conversations, I mean, you know, I've taken the step to, you know, personally live that in my life. And not only live it in my life, but encourage others to do that, you know, through my business. But yeah, I mean, you know, again, when I first was running, you know, that was my thing, health. And they're like, Rob, we need a little bit more than that, you know? So the health of the city is definitely one of my priorities. You know, I would love to try to make the city of Peekskill the healthiest city in Westchester, you know, and I think it's possible. I really do think it's possible. We don't have many cities to compete with. It's like, what, like 4 cities, Jay? 4 or 5 cities in the county of Westchester?
Yeah, a few, yeah.
Yeah, so you know, I think it can be done. So, you know, I'm the guy to do it.
In the Common Council, and we are expecting to this year to have a improve to that. I don't know what is your experience to buy online. I mean, unfortunately, I have it too. There are no team now. Well, there are team because 21, 24, but those guys that I have it here in the house, they almost every day I had to open a bus over there, and I don't know what I'm gonna do to all the buses that I have it empty to and waiting for that. I think this is the reality. I think in very soon, maybe next year, we're gonna see a increase for the collection for that. We have that conversation with the new city manager that we have. Unfortunately, this year when we prepare the budget, the number was not good, and because, you know, COVID situation, the city lost a lot of money for a lot of renovation, parking, different things. And we were very tight for this year budget. But thank God I think we are going now in the right direction. The city expect to have some you know, renovation and some help for federal government, other things that approve. So I think the next year is going to be much better for them. It had to be increased. I mean, that's something that we cannot keep it like that.
There are a lot of things that I think we can explore doing. You know, one thing we're exploring is how to reduce trash, right? We burn right now all of the garbage of Westchester County and some of Connecticut's garbage in Peekskill. So we suffer much higher rates of pollution than other communities. And I think there is a lot we can do to work on reducing waste and the trash that's being burned that we're all breathing in. We have higher rates of asthma than other communities, I think, you know, clearly as a result. Our slate would like to establish a sustainability task force. And that task force would work with a coordinator and really set environmental goals for the city And it would really harness a lot of existing expertise that already is in our community. So we have an amazing Conservation Advisory Council. They do phenomenal work. They're responsible for really pushing a tree ordinance that I hope is finally going to be passed after years of advocacy for it, for example. And I would really seek to tap into expertise that already is here from scientists and other, people who've been fighting for environmental justice for many years. So I think that there is a lot of potential already here to reduce our carbon footprint and make Peekskill a healthier city, and just make sure that our growth does not come at the expense of public health, right? Because it really doesn't have to. We can really require developers to grow our city and develop our city in a way that will have positive outcomes on public health.
Doing some stuff already. I mean, basically, I've had a lot of experience working with development projects. I was a planner for the city, and I've done some consulting in this field. And so we go through an environmental review for all new construction projects, for instance, and look to see in what way can we eliminate unnecessary parking spaces for extra vehicles, or can we build buildings close to train stations so there's less cars? Can we have LEED certified buildings? And the environmental review looks beyond that into how much use of water and sewer and utilities will be involved in, and what ways in which to cut that back, with low flow toilets and all kinds of stuff like that. So in terms of new construction, I have a lot of experience with different ways in which, looking into the future, we can do this. I do think that in terms of environmental justice for the city of Peekskill, we do look down the road and look at the resource recovery plan. There's no immediate need to deal with it, I don't think, nor is there the capability of actually closing it until we find some alternate means to deal with the garbage. But if you look down the road 10 years, we should have a goal of dealing with that. In the interim, helping the air condition, the quality of the air to be improved, to make sure they're using the best technology, and push for that. But also push for a long-term solution for the garbage burn facility, which has had its place. It does do what it's supposed to do. It has passed the EC standards, but I think down the road we don't want. I think that type of facility can be considered outmoded over time, and it has to be replaced.
Apparently, you saw a need to run for mayor. So my question is, what would your administration do differently from the present administration?
Yeah, that's a great question. Honestly, I've always worked around government, but did not plan to run for office. This is not a role I saw myself in. I'm usually sort of agitating from the outside, that sort of approach. But there's been some real concrete policy and priorities that I don't think that the current council as a whole has prioritized or done a good enough job on. This is nothing personal. I know we all know each other, but whether it was the issue of not hearing from the public and then making a big decision to sell a piece of public property, and then to decide that would be for luxury apartments when the developer gave the option to build middle income housing. Then aside from that, other issues, the growth of the city. Our city's comprehensive plan dates back to 1968. So we are doing all this development and growth without an updated plan. That means that it's going to happen in a way that benefits the developers and not us. So to me, seeing that was a big motivation. And then housing has become, to me, really maybe my most important issue. It's a basic human right. Everyone should have access to safe, secure housing that they can afford. And just seeing the affordability crisis that's been happening in Peekskill and throughout the region, there are steps that local government can take, whether it's enacting Emergency Tenant Protection Act, which is a state law that Peekskill has decided not to adopt locally. And I think that is a big first step that would really put protections in place for people in certain buildings, whereas they will know that their rent will not go through the roof just because Peekskill is getting more popular. Again, on the housing, we can find ways to create more housing that's affordable to people who live in Peekskill. We still don't have an ordinance mandating inclusionary housing in market rate developments. We have 180 units going up on Park Place. I just spent the last 2 days talking to neighbors along Lincoln and Park. They are worried about housing and being able to afford to stay in Peekskill. The current council has not done enough, and a lot of times my running mate, Councilperson Agadello, has been a lone voice in trying to push the council in these directions. And I decided, when the community came together in January, a group of residents came together and said, we want an option, we want a more progressive option with taking bolder stances on these issues. And through that process, our slate emerged through a community process. So I guess that's a long answer, Ramona, as to say I hadn't sort of planned for this, but it turned out that I actually think I have a really good background and set of skills and experience that does lend me well for this position. And I just decided to go.
Mayor Rainey has done a phenomenal job, and we work really closely together. This council, should we all be successful, will be different. There'll be some training. We have a new member, so there would need to be some training with, Rob as a new council person, and depending upon who's on the council. However, I'm kind of, and Keisha will tell you this, I'm kind of cut and dry. I don't like to draw things out. I like to get business done. And I'm that person in the back wing that's saying, okay, let's get this done. So I have a strong connection with the city manager, and I gauge things, and I look at the community and what I think is important and what people are coming back, and I look for input from the community as to what they want to see and what needs to come up. And that's what I pose to the council. So I will continue to do that. So I think it may be move a little faster, and not have as long meetings, and kind of be a little more cut and dry and get to the point. But in terms of where we are development wise, I would really like to continue moving the city forward, using the DRI grants, making sure that stuff comes to fruition, watching development and making sure that we're developing the right way for the city of Peekskill, for what's important to us in our city, not what developers want to bring here. And to make sure that as we're developing and growing, we're doing it smartly, and we're making sure that we're carrying everybody within the city. It's great to develop, but we have to make sure that we take care of everyone that's here.
Great question. This actually speaks to the reason why I'm running for re-election with a whole nother ticket. I've realized in the 3.5 years that I've served in office that you can't get anything done if you don't have 4 votes. It all comes down to the numbers, right? It all comes down to being able to build a majority in a direction towards different policies in order for them to be taken seriously by city staff, and in order for them to actually move forward and get done. And the reason why I'm running with the people that I'm running with this year is because we're running on a cohesive, clear policy agenda. We're clear on our principles, we're clear on our values, we're clear on the reality of the issues and struggles that our residents are facing, and we're committed towards finding solutions to those problems. That means things like the Emergency Tenant Protection Act, which is something that I brought up my first year of office, can finally be a reality here in the city of Peekskill. Things like finally updating our master plan. We have not updated, or the last master plan that was published in the city of Peekskill was in 1968. And typically municipalities write their master plans to cover about 2 decades in the future of their city or town. And the fact that we haven't updated ours in such a long time kind of speaks to how developers are coming in and building projects that really you know, and it's not to say that developers don't have good intentions or don't have good ideas, because some of the proposals that are being pitched are great ideas, and some of them are just out of character for our city. But because we don't have a vision, because we don't have a direction, and because we don't have a document that delineates exactly what parameters we want our city to grow in, with participation from the community, so we can be setting those parameters in a way that we can all agree on, developers are coming in and they are the ones who are making decisions that are impacting the generations to come, or the years to come, for what Peekskill will look like. And it's unfortunate that we are losing out on the opportunity to have our voices heard, and to make sure that our concerns are being addressed. And one way in which we can stop that from happening is creating that vision, putting it on paper, and finally updating our master plan. So this is that aside from housing, to me is kind of like the biggest issue. And if, in terms of like my tenure, like what I would be most proud of, aside from ensuring that Peekskill stays affordable, is finally updating our master plan, because that is our guiding document. It's not only a guiding document for development, but I've heard from so many of our department heads in City Hall, and I won't name names, who have told me that they feel like the city has no direction. And we have really talented staff who feel like they can't fully reach their potential because they don't know what the vision of the city of Peekskill really is. And, you know, and that's not to say that individual council members don't have ideas of what they want Peekskill to look like in the future, but we need a cohesive plan. We need an agenda with that is backed up by a majority of people on the council to be able to move that agenda forward. That's not what currently exists right now. Currently, we have people who have many different ideas, many different priorities, and are not on the same page. We need a group of people who will finally be on the same page, who understand what the problems Peekskill residents are facing, and who are prepared and have started to look into and really map out policies that will bridge those gaps and resolve some of these issues. And that's what I'm hoping that we can accomplish. It's not just about taking political stances, and I feel like because I've been in the minority in many ways for so long, the only thing I've been able to do is kind of take these political stances, because one vote doesn't mean anything. But with a group of people who are like-minded, who have the same concerns and who view the same issues as priorities, I believe we can finally move forward with substantial policy that will actually make a difference in people's lives.
A lot of it comes around housing and communication. By communication, I really mean, you know, throughout this pandemic, I did see that there just wasn't enough outreach and utilizing the tools that we have. You know, using social media is a really great way of connecting to the community nowadays. Being able to use all different types of outlets to reach community members was really important in COVID and this past year in general. Not being able to reach or have access to that, whether there's a language barrier or if it's because they don't know where to go. As somebody who did not grow up in a politically active family, I know firsthand that it's not always easy to know where do you go, right? And I think being able to have clearer channels of communication with our community is really, really vital. And in a situation where we need to have that communication, you know, to share information on where you can get food, where there's a food distribution site, that really matters a lot. And so I think that having better communication and really utilizing those means will make a huge difference. So that's one area that is a concern for me that I want to really focus on when I get into office, if that happens. And another area is housing. Housing is a really big one. We have seen development happening in Peekskill. And like I said, I don't think there's anything wrong with development, but if it's gonna come at a cost where people can no longer afford to live in the city, there needs to be pushback. And I think there's nothing wrong with challenging those who have been in office for a long time, if it means getting the right things done and really supporting our community. It's not always easy to do that, but if it's necessary, there should be that need and it should be done. Housing is very personal to me as well, because my family moved here in the 90s and were able to build a foundation. I had previous family who did as well. And I know many families do that as well here who live in Peekskill. And so I think a lot of people who came here before were able to build a foundation, eventually find a home like my family did, be able to live here and support their family and the individuals they care for. And so I think as we also create more development and really change the city a lot, gentrify it, you know, we're gonna also run into issues where people can no longer afford to be here. So that's my biggest concern. Those are two of my biggest concerns, along with other ones. But I think my focus will really be around communications and building real housing and making sure that the housing crisis is resolved here in Peekskill.
Thank you.
You know, the issue, I mean, I don't think there's anyone on the council like myself. So, you know, I would say, you know, they're just missing, you know, someone with my voice, someone with my perspective. You know, again, whether that's culturally, you know, on you know, health-wise. So yeah, I mean, I don't have a huge issue. I would say for me, it's just, we just got to get involved. You know, we just, you know, a lot of times we complain about the issues, but, you know, we don't want to get involved. So, you know, for me, you know, I would say, you know, the only issue is that I'm not in there, you know?
First thing, there was a lot of things that we started. Sometimes I don't want to hurt like a many politician. Even I don't want to identify myself like a politician, but unfortunately, that's what we are. But they say they need more time. I mean, I can mention it to you when we get in office in 2018 January. I remember the end January or beginning of February. Assemblywoman Sandy Gallo, she came to Peekskill and doing the town hall as she usually did it. And I had the opportunity to tell her and work with her about how the city was needed to have a fields, like the municipality doesn't have a field for soccer, for football or lacrosse. I mean, just in the school has that thing. But the community didn't have the opportunity. So we started to work with that. She got a lot of support for that. She got to put a lot of interest for that, and took like 2 years. The Friday before the 21st, we received the answer. The Peekskill had $1 million grant to improve the DP Park. So we got it already. Now we gotta make sure that could be I don't know, I say bill. And so that's one of my things. I mean, I think we need to engage more with the community. I mean, as a board that we have in the city, we need to have a more participation for the people in the board. Sometimes people, they just focus in the council. They just focus in the mayor. But we got a planning commission. There's a lot of responsibility. There's a lot of power over there. I mean, the people can have to decide what kind of plan the city can approve over there. You got the historical landmark. You got the zoning appeal board, and then you got the historical board. And people, they don't pay attention for that, but I think that was one of the requests that I did it to Dr. Mauricio when he came the first time here. Peekskill should provide, Peekskill school should provide local history. Because when you don't know local history, you're gonna do it the same mistake like people did it years and years ago. And I don't know how that you are original from here, that went to the school here. I asked too many friends and even my kids, and they never give it to them local history. So we are so rich in that. So that's a different kind of thing. But I think we need to work more with the business area, more closer. Peekskill. I mean, I think we need to work in why to create more jobs. I mean, that was one of the requests for the youth people and the community, the forum that was made like 3 years ago, for many organizations when they received a recommendation from the city, and I remember that was one of the first requests, like more job for young people.
Okay.
And even working with the transportation. I mean, public transportation. It's no city, but that's a county.
Right.
I think we need to request more to the county, to another level. What we need to provide more public transportation here in Peekskill.
Yes.
And I've been working with that, but I want to see more. The COVID give it to us very, very good example. How is the really need when we didn't have almost any taxi drivers in that moment when we have like the high thing, when everything was shut down, when La Placita and Save a Lot was closed. So a lot of seniors start to have a problem to buy grocery because they don't find taxi service, but there was no public transportation to go to Stop and Shop. And there are a couple of things that we need to work and improve.
I think the biggest issue facing Peekskill right now that really makes me want to get involved is that Peekskill is being developed in a way that is not prioritizing community voice and is in a way that is forcing people out of Peekskill. And it's linked to a lot of things that, are a part of the platform I'm running on, right? Like there's this issue of smart development, of making sure that we are not begging developers to come here and giving them whatever they want in exchange, that we are making very tough demands on them. And I haven't seen that happen, enough in the past. I've been watching and I haven't seen developers giving back what I think they should be giving back to the community in terms of affordable housing and other community benefits. We are not desperate for developers to come here. Developers want to come to Peekskill. We are an amazing community. We are a walkable downtown. We are riverfront, and we are on a Metro North line an hour from New York City. Developers want to build here. So we need to make a lot of demands of those developers that protect people who are living here and need affordable housing, who need clean air to breathe, and and a lot of other things. And we need to be thinking of affordable in terms of what's affordable for people in Peekskill, not Westchester County, because currently, affordable is talked about in terms of the county, and we live in a very rich county, and we are one of the poorest municipalities within this county, and our median income is not comparable to the county's median income. So that's, one thing. And then connected to that as well, I would say, is just the space for people to have a voice in decisions and express their concerns and be educated at the same time, because it's not about just having people come out and just sort of like, talk and judge and give, opinions. That, it's about educating the community about what you're doing and why you're doing it, informing people about, policy and about what's possible, and then allowing them to take part in decision making in a way that is welcoming and that invites people in to the conversation. And that, that is something that I hope to see more of going forward.
This is my second year on the job. I got appointed in 2019 and ran unopposed in 2020. And now we're in this primary in 2021. And there's been a number of things that I've been interested in working on. I'm also on the Peekskill Housing Authority, and they're involved in the Kylie Center and Boys and Girls Club coming in. So that's been a big focus of where I've been working. We also have the DRI grants that we need to implement to help the downtown. We have Paramount Center improvements that I'm working with folks on. I think there's so many opportunities for the city going forward. It's a very good time for the city. We've come through COVID-19 without a whole bunch of stores closing without, you know, a kind of depressing scene arriving. And we're now sort of struggling to get everything back open. And we've got grants that can help us to help small business to reopen. So I think that my focus will be, I think, principally on development, making sure those grants is $10 million we got in grants is only part of the grants. We got a total of 26 million that I can account for. I'm sure it's more than that, that can be pumped into the city to help the economy. Some of it's for affordable housing, to get that built. And some of it's for direct grants to business. And some of it's for park improvements. There's so many things that are wrapped up into all the different grants we've got. So I'm going to focus on getting those things done. I think the government functioning has been good, but can always be improved. And I've been pushing the city manager to see when we can reopen City Hall so people can just walk in and get served the needs they have. And that area I'm looking at. The other is that there's a Section 8 program. When I first started to work for the city of Peekskill, I helped set up the Section 8 program, and it's still continued. We got up to, Ms. Overby and I set that up, and we got up to about 400 units. It's now at 725 units, but there's 150 Section 8 vouchers that are not yet used, and that's getting landlords interested in agreeing to accept that. We have the tenants who would like to use the voucher, but we do not have landlords agreeing to it. And that's an area I want to work on. There's 150 families out there that could find themselves going from paying 2/3 of their income for rent to getting to 30% and actually be able to do things like put a little bit of money aside or fix a car, those kinds of things. So I'm hoping there's different ways to tangle with that. I'm hoping to explore getting those done. And then at the Housing Authority, the buildings are old, and we're looking for grants, and we're looking at different strategies to upgrade Bowman Towers and Dunbar Heights and all the Housing Authority property. So I'm both on the Housing Authority board and on the council. So I'm hoping by those two positions, I can somehow help move that along and get the necessary monies into actually. The goal of the Peekskill Housing Authority is decent, safe, and sanitary housing, and at an affordable rate. Obviously, you pay 30% of your income there, and we're having a hard time keeping it up to that decent level that we need. It's a struggle day by day, week by week, to put the things back together again that needed to be replaced, really. So.
With the world's focus on equality, what will you do within the various municipalities of Peekskill to ensure there is adequate implicit bias and discrimination awareness and/or education?
First step was our task force, which I know you know a lot about, and Mr. Wright as well, but really making sure that we look at the recommendations that came forth from that and make sure that the work gets done. That is a working document and not something to be put on the shelf and ignored, but to actually make sure that we start to get that work done. And one of my priorities in that is the review board. So that's one. Number two is making sure that we have training for all employees. Off-premise training, not so much stuff that's done within the city, but true training that whether it be by Zoom or however it is, to really show the difference for our managers. Number one, I think we need to start with our department heads, and then it trickles down to everybody within the department and within the city.
That's really something myself and my running mates have been thinking a lot about. We definitely hear that Peekskill is not immune, unfortunately, to at least a feeling that there isn't always fairness within the city municipal department. So I do think we need to look at that, and we need to make sure that all of our leadership throughout the departments is absolutely clear that there is zero tolerance for any type of racially based bias, motivated actions, decision-making, policy. So I think it is worth reviewing what's going on right now. I think I've heard enough concerns that I would like there to be a little bit more independent oversight, or at least some assistance independent assistance in terms of what we can do better, you know, because we can always do things better. I'm sure there are some policies, training, different things that we're not doing now that we could be. So I think it is worth reviewing the status quo, seeing where we are at, and leaning on better policies and better procedures. But also, we also need to make sure that employees are comfortable coming forward and raising concerns too. And I don't know that a lot of that is involved, comes into the unions, but I want to make sure that there is a venue and a way for people to raise concerns.
What would you do to include groups like ours into the fabric of our community and continuing to uphold our mission in our community?
When I first got on the council and I looked at our workforce within the city of Peekskill, I didn't see many people who looked like me. I didn't see any people who were Hispanic or bilingual, not at all. And I couldn't figure out why until I figured out the hiring process. And when I figured out the hiring process, I knew there had to be change. And I will tell you that, you know, we had employees who worked in the city of Peekskill for, 15 years, who never had an opportunity to interview for any jobs that were coming up. And nobody could tell me why. I can tell you today, we have an African-American judge. That did not come easy, but I will take credit that we pushed to make sure that happened. We have a Latina judge. We pushed to make that happen. We have a Black firefighter. We didn't have Black firefighters in 40 something years. It took that long to hire a Black firefighter. We didn't have people who spoke Spanish within City Hall. Today, we have bilingual people in City Hall. We have people who look like our community. And that's what we need. We need to be diverse. We need to make sure that everybody is represented. It's very important. I think I came to an NAACP meeting to let people know municipal jobs just don't pop up. You have to prepare for them. You need to make sure that you're taking civil service exams. So when those jobs come up, you are prepared and you can apply for them. Because the first thing that they're going to say to you is, oh, you're not on the list. And if you're not on the list, you can't get a job. So I truly believe that if you don't have a seat at the table and you don't prepare yourself, your community does not know what's going on. So that's why I encourage people to come out on the boards, to come out and work, because that's where the work of the city is done. The council sits there, but your zoning boards, your planning boards, those are the people who make the decisions of what happens within the city, as well as your council. So it's important that we fill those positions with knowledgeable people and people who look like our city. And that's what I plan to do and to push for.
Not easy issues to confront, but that's where my my promise is that, to continue listening, learning, and addressing issues, not shying away from them. A big part of our platform and our motivations is that not all Peekskill residents feel connected to their government, to their elected officials. That's something we can definitely do better. I've talked about language and those barriers, but definitely the NAACP needs to be leaned on, heard from, uplifted. And I would say this, one thing I really believe in that the city can do better is, in general, uplifting, working with, just really fostering the residents and the organizations, whether they're formal or informal, that are doing work to make Peekskill better. There's so many people, we're blessed as a community that people love their city. They're involved, they're active. The fact that you get on all the time over 40 people at your meetings is really something. That's a lot of people. That's an important voice that should be heard by the city. So I think just doing better of connecting the city with all of the groups, but that definitely does start with groups like the NAACP.
Something that's been coming up quite a bit in different spaces. The city has seen a number of lawsuits as it pertains to racism, discrimination, retaliation, that hundreds of thousands of dollars have gone to many settlements as it pertains to lawsuits of this kind. So it is an issue. It is an issue that is very pertinent to our city and very pertinent to City Hall, and something that we have thought about for that reason. First of all, I believe that there is a problem with compensation in the city of Peekskill in terms of staff. I do think that we need to take a look and have a third party, a neutral and unbiased party come in and do an equity audit of our salaries to ensure that people who are being placed in different roles are being paid comparable to what folks their predecessors were being paid, because we're finding out that that men who were in a certain position were paid at a higher rate than women who are currently in that position. So that's something that we really need to those are disparities that need to be addressed and need to be addressed quickly. One, because it's wrong, but also because, you know, that is a lawsuit waiting to happen, and those are tax dollars of our residents that we're wasting. I also, so aside from having an equity audit from kind of this third party around compensation, I do also think that we need to have kind of like a dialogue. There has to be a mediator. Perhaps it could be done with this kind of third-party contractor or someone we contract out to who could perform this audit, may also be able to perform a number of interviews within different departments. I understand that the union's job is to do just that. The union's job is to protect their employees, to make sure that if they're being retaliated against or if there are racist claims against their management, that they're being addressed. And if they're not being addressed by the union, that is also a problem and something that we need to talk to union leaders about. But it does seem like there's a disconnect there, because I myself have spoken to rank and file workers who truly feel like they are being discriminated against due to the color of their skin, due to their position. So those are all really complicated issues, given kind of the legality, given kind of the responsibilities of HR and unions. But but just because it's complicated doesn't mean we should shy away from trying to find a solution. So I do think bringing in a third party entity, a contractor, you know, a professional who has dealt with these kinds of issues with other organizations and corporations can lead us to find a way in which we can resolve the issues that we've been facing for many years, definitely for the extent of the time I've been in office, and probably for many decades in the past as well. So I don't have, I mean, outside of that, I don't have like a perfect answer, because I do think that this is kind of one of the more complex problems, given like the roles that everyone play. But it's one that I'm committed to solving. I think that equity has to be at the center of every decision we make. And it's something that we really need to make sure we're being intentional about considering, ensuring that we're intentionally considering what the impact is for all these different circumstances, because it's unfortunately a reality that we have to reckon with in our city hall, and it's hopefully something that we can find a resolution to in a timely way. And with that support from an unbiased third-party entity, I think we can definitely work towards a solution.
Thing that I think the city could take a huge initiative on is having anti-racism workshops. And I know that there are other nonprofits who also do this, where they have a day where their employees take time to learn about the biases that they do have. And it's very interesting to hear how that also works out and how it plays out between amongst different individuals. And so I think that that should be prioritized. It absolutely should. I think there are a lot of individuals who don't realize they do have biases. So being able to make sure that we're bringing awareness to that in City Hall amongst the employees who work there is really important, but for us as well as elected officials or any elected official. You know, just because you're sitting in a position of leadership doesn't excuse you from also doing those workshops. So I think that it should be mandatory for everybody, and being able to also ensure that if there is an issue with that somebody has with another city employee, making sure that the environment in City Hall feels welcoming enough so that individuals feel like they can come forward and say, you know, I'm having an issue with regards to discrimination, or, you know, someone said something to me that I deem inappropriate and not acceptable for the work area. That needs to really be seen and felt in City Hall. And I think that starts with leadership. And really, I think a lot of these issues really start with leadership. If the leadership is not willing to address them or have that conversation openly, then, you know, we need to make sure that it's going to happen, because if it doesn't, then we continue to perpetuate a lot of stereotypes and norms that no longer need to be perpetuated. So, so that's my answer.
Okay.
And again, equalities is at the center of how I govern and how I make decisions, making sure that we are really making sure that we're being realistic about not only who's at the table, but who isn't at the table, and being intentional about bringing those voices and bringing marginalized people to and building spaces in which they can address their concerns and be part of that decision-making process is what I'm all about. Is definitely what this campaign is all about, and is the way that I think we want to make sure that we're crafting policy, right? Always. And this is kind of my motto. Like I believe that policy needs to be crafted by the people who are most impacted by issues, right? Because the people who are the closest to the problem are going to be the closest to the solution. And if we're leaving them out of these conversations, who are we to say what is the best resolution for issues that they're dealing with on a day-to-day basis? So we're not truly bringing justice to these issues if we're not including those who are being impacted by them. And that is at the center of every issue, whether it's, and this has been the case, like when we go to eliminate a parking spot on a residential street somewhere, I want to make sure that every house is being canvassed. For example, we removed a handicap spot because there was a house, the person who was handicapped no longer lived there, they moved. So they requested for that parking spot to be made a regular parking spot because it was no longer necessary. And I wanted to make sure that we canvassed every house on that block to make sure that this wasn't a need that was still needed, right? And this is kind of how we should be working towards our problems. We should be thinking about who do these issues concerns, have we sought out their feedback, and if we haven't, prioritizing doing so, and then finding ways in which we can integrate that feedback so it can be part of a solution, so we can make sure that we're crafting policy that really works for all of us.
And I think that goes across the board as well, right? Is really ensuring that we're having this continuous conversation and figuring out how can we best serve you, and how can we best give you the resources or amplify the events that you're having. Having a real relationship and an active one, I think, will be really helpful in City Hall for everybody. So.
I bring, I guess I would be an advocate for it. Again, you know, those conversations, you know, there's research that shows that, I mean, there's a ton of information there. There's, you know, I definitely think it's something that we have to take our time with, because, you know, in those cultural conversations or racial conversations, people tend to become defensive. You know, at least from the studies that I've seen. So, you know, I definitely think it's super important. You know, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the ACE program, which I think it stands for Adverse Child experiences, I think it's called. And I mean, that's just, you know, amazing research that's just come to the forefront about, you know, how your childhood experiences affect you, just, you know, not just your perception of the world, but even like your health, you know, your stress level, you know, so, you know, I definitely would want to implement the ACE research. And it's really, really powerful research. You should check it out. But yeah, you know, that right there, we need it. We definitely need it. But people that I've known that have went through those, how you put it, not studies, how would you say, you know, people that have went through the Zoom or, you know, the education process, a lot of times they come out on defense, like, yeah, well, you know, they're not talking about me, you know? So, you know, it's, you know, we got to have the right person, you know, setting the stage to the conversation. I don't think it's something that we should just, you know, just like force on them. You know, it's more like, yeah, we got to do this, but understand that, you know, you kind of have to let your guard down. So I'm with it all the way. I think everyone needs to understand where each other is coming from. Definitely. I mean, the NAACP, you know, has been around for, you know, how long, V? You know, so it's, you know, they've always been an advocate for justice, you know, and, you know, you guys have done an amazing job with the organization here in the city of Peekskill. You know, I know sometimes people say, well, I feel like not doing enough for this or that, but people don't realize it's a lot of work and it's a lot of off-camera work. Okay, so but yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, how I would be honored, you know, to work with an organization like yourself.
I started to do a long time ago when I was trying to get a bar for like African American Latino community. I mean, that's a very huge. I don't know if you remind like what happened 4 years ago. That there was one Latino was attacking the politician. They tried to get create a conflict between Latinos and Black or African American people. And my first call, it was to be to the former president for the NAACP, Martin, and get involved with putting inside that thing and stop at that issue, because it's very easy to put in two communities to fight. I mean, so many people, they can do it very easy when you have an issue like that. But I think that's always it was my goal, and try to have a more inclusive. That's something that we really need. I mean, you know how we review the staff and the police. How was that 10 years ago? How is now? I think it has a good improvement, but I think it needs more. I think we need to review that thing in everywhere here. I mean, how many minorities people are in our city? How many minority people are, and not just like a worker, even in the health department. And I think at the school is working very well in that area. But also, why we have more people try to open business, and for one part for the population, why the other ones they don't do it? I mean,
right.
Bring that discussion, open discussion, and try to bring solution. I think that could be a good discussion. Not as people to try to competing. No, I mean to provide opportunity. I'm sorry. They say the host put a mute. Well, I don't know if I did it the right answer for that.
Yes.
You know, we are running on time. Now you're immune, Valerie.
I think there's a lot we can do. I think that, you know, bias training is part of our platform of open government. I think both within within our local government, there needs to be anti-bias training, and also, you know, just so people who are working for the city are not facing discrimination, and also people who are facing city employees are not experiencing it on the other side. I think really, you know, electing people who prioritize issues that people of color are facing is sort of like the most direct answer I can give to that question. I think, you know, looking at the track records and, you know, what people, the platforms of the people who are running, and whether their platforms prioritize the issues that people who face discrimination are struggling with, is a way to ensure that those issues are dealt with on the city level. And I think, you know, ensuring that there are policies in place. These things don't have to be just, you know, opt in to a training. There should be very strict policies with very strict and you know, clear consequences when there are issues of bias and discrimination, and when people experience discrimination, you know, from the city or in their workplace at the city, there should be very clear consequences and a clear course of action. And there should be a committee that, you know, can review, you know, any complaints in a fair, you know, way. So there should be, you know, some kind of structure or system in place to review complaints of discrimination within the city. Yeah, I mean, I think that, like, you know, what I was talking about earlier with bringing expertise, there are a ton of people doing amazing work, including you all, us, I should say, because I'm part of it. And we should be at the table, you know, and we should be working hand in hand to get stuff done, to lead initiatives and to bring the community. I think one of the, you know, one of the amazing things that the NAACP has is that it's sort of like a line into the community, right? And I think that the government, the city council, and the city hall would be very, you know, smart to sort of harness your expertise and your access to the community in order to partner with you and bring community voice into what they're doing, whether that's council meetings, or, you know, big decisions that are being made around police reform. And I know you did play a role in police reform. I don't think it has to be limited to things like police reform. You know, I think the NAACP was brought into that conversation for obvious reasons, but I don't think it has to be limited to things that are so explicitly about, you know, racism. It can be everything. You all are tapped into the community of color here, and we are largely a community of color, and we want to engage our residents who are residents of color in any way we can do that in all decisions that are being made about affordable housing, about environmental justice. We should tap into all community organizations, including the NAACP.
The time that I was the affirmative action officer for the city, going back many years ago, mostly for contract work, to make sure that people that contractors that hired did in fact have minority workers. I think it's a long-term process. It goes into the roots. I think we start with City Hall itself to make sure that our employees reflect the character in terms of the profile of our average citizen. And so we have a workforce that reflects the community that they work for. I think, by the way, we've done some good work at the police department there. I was looking at what the police department was made up of 10 years ago and what it is now. And we've made some real progress. There's no question. There's more to be done. But I'm looking at it and saying, okay, so long as we keep plugging away at this. So if we get the city's workforce to reflect the quality and character of a very diverse, creative, and interesting community, then I think we will be able to carry out our responsibility of making sure everyone is fairly treated and not discriminated against, and in fact allowed to be the best they can be. I mean, so that I would look inward at us first, and then I think having you know, and that's true on the council too, that the team that is running with me, Vivian and Rob and Ramon, reflect the community, I think, both in small business and in also just the way in which their age and interests and everything else they have. So I'm looking inward and looking at the elected group to kind of lead us forward in making sure that everybody is treated. I just don't like anybody not to be treated well. And when we ran the Section 8 program, Miss Overby and I, we had it on the second floor in the same offices where major developers would come in and expect to get treated like royalty. And the average person, a young woman trying to hold her job and raise her kids, coming in to get a Section 8 certificate then instead of a voucher, they would be treated equally. There would be no difference. And so everybody deserves respect. And that's true at the Housing Authority too, where I'm working. Training, there is training, and the training is needed. But when you have, my experience, when you have a fully integrated department, the training is still needed, but is not the same as training a department, for instance, it's all white. And they pick up some of this and think, oh, great. And then I don't think they fully understand it until they're working side by side with folks that have come from different background and stuff. So I'm looking inward, and the training is absolutely necessary. I think I was very pleased with all the work you all in the Police Reform Task Force did. I think, and I was very pleased with Mayor Rainey's pulling the whole community together after the death of murder of George Floyd, and making sure that we were all kind of united in that. And then some of that stuff fizzled out, so all the work you guys are doing on the police task force that's continuing is absolutely necessary. Can be the worst and toughest area. So if we get the police fully plugged in and doing what they can do, that there's a touch point there that can be very bad if it's not addressed. And we're doing pretty well here in Peekskill, but we can always do better. I think, the mission of equal justice, equal treatment, equal education, all the things you all want to do are things that need to be done that, I fully support. It's a shame that we're at this point after all these years that is so badly needed. And sometimes in some ways, it's almost worse now with some of the right-wing negative stuff flying around, and some feeling justified that they can not treat somebody fairly. It's pretty bad. We were making progress, and then this last, I don't know, 5 years has been a horror show.
With their membership.
Absolutely.
Continuous
Absolutely.
membership.
And you may not see me at meetings, but I will do the work. I'm spread a little thin, but you know that you can call me, and whatever needs to be done, I'll get it done.
Absolutely, yes. No, totally separate from my run for office. I plan on being a member as long as I'm a Peekskill resident, which will hopefully be a long time. So no, absolutely. I mean, I joined last year. Ramona probably knows exactly when my renewal date is coming up. But, part of it was as somebody who grew up with white privilege and wanting to recognize that I've had a lot of advantages in life. And so looking for ways of well, how can I be an ally? How can I just not be on the sidelines? And one of the most obvious was at least join the NAACP, be a dues paying member, come to the meetings and listen. And I think, that's the role I've tried to play at meetings is I find, first of all, they are extremely well run and the committee system is excellent, but I learned something at all the meetings I'm at. I find out about a different community issue that I did not know about. And that's something, regardless of me running for office, it's important for me. It's things I care about. I do like to be involved. And I'll give you this commitment too. I do want to look into definitely joining a committee, outreach, communications. Those are like the obvious ones. But then the presentation that Laura and Vanessa did a few meetings ago, about food sustainability.
Mhm.
Had me thinking and Laura, I did the survey, and in the survey I did say, yes, I'd be interested in joining that committee. So I'm awaiting a call from that. But so I'll leave it at that. But no, I'm proud and honored to become a member and to be able to sit in and at least listen during the meetings.
I will absolutely continue to be a member regardless of the results of the election. Proud member of the NAACP. It was the first organization I joined when I went away for college. So it's been a long time coming.
I would love to still be a member. I have not been as active as I would like to be, but I was participating with the youth NAACP, and they did a lot of great work. And I think it's great that there's also a branch for that too, because there are a lot of young people who are very active and just have a lot of energy and really looking to be part of that change. So I would absolutely love to. And I really do have a passion for working with youth as well. So if there's a way to also, work in that capacity and help you and amplify your mission, that's really what I feel like I should do as a sitting council member, should that happen.
It's strength in numbers. So yes, of course. I don't have a problem being a member.
Yeah, I am a member. I mean, I don't think that I paid my registration last year because the COVID, all that thing. I mean, I was not even participation in many of those meetings. Last year was very tough for us. That, I mean, all the commission that we worked last year was crazy for the police task reform. Maybe you heard something about the fire department. I had to get involved in. We were working very close to that. We need to. So, but I am considered to be to keep my I said do an update for my registration in the NAACP.
There are a ton of people doing amazing work, including you all, us, I should say, because I'm part of it.
So yes, I would happily join the NAACP, but won't do it until the election's over, so people don't accuse me of being somehow of Johnny come lately, or whatever the right expression would be. But I have I'm an admirer of the work you all do.